The Rise of America 1620. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination. So don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like. And if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 1 America. Hiss. Zhao Hongai raised his right hand and gently stroked the wound on his right cheek, the pain causing him to gasp. A long wound stretched from the corner of his eye to the corner of his mouth, deep enough to reveal the bone. The enemy who had inflicted such damage lay bloodied and lifeless not far away. He had nearly been blinded. Zhao Hongai couldn't help but feel a sense of dread at the thought. Fatigue washed over him, permeating his brain. Zhao Hongai, feeling relaxed, sat on the ground and watched the Indians around him finishing off their attackers. Hurry! Finish off those who are still breathing. Once we've dealt with these sneak attackers, we can have lunch. A chaotic commotion surrounded him, punctuated by the sound of sharp weapons slicing flesh. Zhao Hongai closed his eyes in agony. The Indian warriors of the Andal tribe occasionally passed by Zhao Hongai, a teenager who looked only 15 or 16 years old, with a look of deep wine in their eyes. Just now, it was this young man with black hair, black eyes, and strange attire who single-handedly slaughtered over a dozen enemy warriors. The Indian warriors held such warriors in high esteem. Slitting the enemy's throat, then scalping their heads with a sharp dagger, and letting out a resounding woo-woo, the faces of the excited Andalu warriors were filled with the joy of victory. As a modern man, Zhao Hongai, even now, was not quite accustomed to the bloody slaughter on the American continent. He found it too brutal and bloody. But he also knew he could do nothing to change it. Such slaughter had been going on in this land for ages, and a mere figure like him could not change it. He could do nothing. And the slaughter would continue into the future. Zhao Hongai was well aware that Britain, France, and the United States had all committed massacres of Indians, directly or indirectly. And Indian tribes had also slaughtered white people and Indians from other tribes, that was clear. The Andalu leader, Bison, came to Zhao Hongai's side and sat on the ground, imitating his example. "How are you? Are your injuries not serious?" the chief inquired with concern. Zhao Hongai opened his eyes and looked at the middle-aged leader of the Andal tribe. "My injuries aren't serious, but this is the 12th enemy attack in 90 days. Your tribe can't just passively accept this. You don't outnumber them. I suggest you migrate," Zhao Hongai suggested. After listening to Zhao Hongai's words, Bison looked down at the black iron axe in his hand and said nothing. After a long pause, he finally said to Zhao Hongai, "I was born here. We hunt in these forests and rivers. After I die, my children will continue to live on this land. No one in the Andal tribe fears death, Alice." Zhao Hongai sighed deeply inwardly. This was his 6th attempt at persuasion. Unfortunately, the Indian tribe simply refused to accept his proposal. To them, Zhao Hongai was always an outsider, not a member of the Andal tribe. Since his argument wasn't working, Zhao Hongai didn't bother to argue any further. He'd already done his best for the Andal tribe, and he owed them nothing. "I'd like to trade again. We still have a lot of beaver and mink furs, and we need weapons." Bison looked at Zhao Hongai seriously. After a moment's thought, Zhao Hongai understood the Indian chief's intention. He was planning a counterattack against the enemy tribe. "Yes, I need to go south. My tribe is waiting for me to return." Zhao Hongai began to spout nonsense. Only he understood that in this era, he had no tribe at all, he was a lone man. His words, besides confirming his own tribe, also reflected his desire to leave. The Andal tribe had a population of just over 600, while their rival tribe was a larger one of 2,000, supported by the French. Therefore, if Bison's tribe didn't migrate, they would face annihilation. Unfortunately, they wouldn't listen, so Zhao Hongai didn't bother to say anything more. After all, he'd already helped them quite a bit in the past 3 months, and had already repaid the favor they'd given him. Thinking of the dozen or so scars on his body, Zhao Hongai felt relieved. "Okay, 1 axe for 30 beaver pelts or 15 sable pelts." Zhao Hongai came to his senses and nodded, agreeing to the other party's request. After all, this deal was definitely worth it for him. A few hours later, on a hilltop a mile west of the Andalu tribe, Zhao Hongai and Bison concluded the transaction. Bison wasn't sad about Zhao Hongyu's departure. Zhao Hongyu had nothing to linger on, either. He didn't want to be buried with the Antler tribe. He just wanted to live well. In such a time of kinship, to live well. After watching Bison and the others disappear into the dense jungle, Zhao Hongyu sat on a rock on the hilltop, looked at the hundreds of pelts around him, and smiled wryly. Why did I have to encounter something like this, a time travel? Zhao Hongyu, a 36-year-old man, a Fortune 500 executive, enjoyed outdoor sports and adventure, and was highly educated, wealthy, and handsome. But these auras no longer held much value for him. He now found himself in America in 1620. He had just completed a contract in the United States and boarded a plane for home. But just 20 minutes into the flight, a bearded man shouted Allahu Akbar, before a flash of fire swept across Zhao Hongyu, and he lost consciousness. When he awoke, he was in a triangular tent, surrounded by Native Americans clad in animal skins and wearing feathers in their hair. He had also gone from 36 to 15 or 16, a markedly younger age. Upon arriving in this world, Zhao Hongyu was terrified and confused by the unfamiliar surroundings and the filthy Indians. He didn't dare speak rashly because he didn't speak the language. Perhaps every time traveler has their own merits, and Zhao Hongyu was no exception. Heaven had gifted him with the ability to speak the world's languages, and with it, a magical cheat. Sitting on a rocky hilltop, Zhao Hongyu looked up at the ruby ring on his left middle finger. Speaking of this cheat, it was truly extraordinary. Once activated, the ring allowed him to purchase all products of the 21st century. Furthermore, items from this era could be traded to the 21st century through the ring. In other words, as long as one had the money, even nuclear weapons could be purchased. For example, just now, Zhao Hongyu had traded 30 low-quality pig iron axes for hundreds of beaver and mink pelts. Those 30 low-quality pig iron axes cost only a mere 1,000 RMB. However, those hundreds of pelts were worth far more. At 21st century prices, a beaver pelt would cost 280 RMB, and a mink pelt 650 RMB. The profit from trading these thousands of pelts could be tens of times greater. Such transactions, with such profits, are becoming increasingly rare in the 21st century. Unfortunately, Zhao Hongyu was in 1620, and he had no reason to be happy about this. Retracting his thoughts, Zhao Hongyu suddenly activated a plugin he called the Spacetime Trader. Do you want to start the trade? Two options appeared in Zhao Hongyu's mind, and he immediately decided on yes. A halo of light, invisible to others, flashed from the pile of furs, and in a split second, the mountain-like pile of furs vanished. As the furs vanished, a cold, metallic synthesized sound echoed in Zhao Hongyu's mind. I received 600 beaver pelts this time, and due to price fluctuations, the price has increased to 290 yuan per piece. I received 150 mink pelts, and the price has increased to 650 yuan per piece. Do you want to trade, Pop? Two more options appeared in Zhao Hongyu's mind. The prices had already increased, so what could Zhao Hongyu be dissatisfied with? For 30 low-quality cast iron axes, exchanging so many furs was already quite satisfying. Yes. Ding dong, 600 beaver pelts received, 290 yuan for each, totaling 174,000 yuan. Ding dong, 150 mink pelts received, 650 yuan for each, totaling 97,500 yuan. Total, 271,500 yuan, 271,500. According to the deal between Zhao Hongyu and Bison, the leader of the Andal tribe, one low-quality cast iron axe was exchanged for 30 beaver pelts or 15 mink pelts. Therefore, Zhao Hongyu traded 20 axes for 600 beaver pelts, and 10 axes for 150 mink pelts. This was the largest transaction Zhao Hongyu had made since arriving in this world. After the furs were sold, a modern savings book appeared in Zhao Hongyu's mind, clearly listing his current wealth. Zhao Hongyu had been in this world for 3 months, and during those 3 months, he had made numerous transactions with the Andal tribe. Although the French had established a colony fortress to the north of the Andal tribe, they maintained strict control over the flow of weapons. Coupled with competition from larger neighboring tribes, the Andal tribe was unable to exchange for iron weapons, resulting in a large backlog of furs within their tribe. Therefore, Zhao Hongyu had made a fortune in the past 3 months. However, Zhao Hongyu also knew that his success was due to many factors. Over time, The Andal tribe no longer had such a large supply of furs. Zhao Hongyu had essentially traded almost all of the Andal furs. Zhao Hongyu's savings account had accumulated a fortune of 1,367,000 yuan, 1,367,000 RMB. Damn the French, Zhao Hongyu cursed under his breath. Just before leaving, the Andal tribe's leader, Bison, had told him that the attacks launched by the Mokley tribe over the past 3 months had nothing to do with Zhao Hongyu. It was because Zhao Hongyu had monopolized the Andal for trade, and the French were furious when they learned of this. Although the Andal tribe refused to trade with the French, their furs would still find their way into their hands through other tribes. While the Andal tribe would suffer, the loss of the indigenous people was of no concern to the French. However, Zhao Hongyu's presence, interfering with their interests, was the most unbearable aspect for the French. Therefore, they provoked the Mokley tribe to attack the Andal tribe. Of course, the Mokley tribe had always coveted the Andal tribe's territory, which was rich in beaver. Zhao Hongyu firmly believed that Prophet was the instigator of war. He didn't yet have the conditions to fight the French, or even other Indian tribes. Bison also told him that he had killed the Mokley leader's brother in the previous battle, so the Mokley tribe would definitely not let him and the Andal tribe go. This was why Bison purchased weapons from Zhao Hongyu and prepared for a surprise attack. After hearing Bison's words, Zhao Hongyu knew his decision to leave was the right one. After his account had over 1 million yuan in funds, Zhao Hongyu decided to purchase help from the trading platform. Fighting alone wasn't the answer, he needed helpers to increase his safety and fight against those who harbored ill will. It was obvious that even if he was powerful, he couldn't take on a tribe on his own. Zhao Hongyu then opened the trading platform and selected the option that would cause him so much pain. Genetic people purchase. Chapter 2. Just like reality. As a time traveler, he naturally possessed certain skills that distinguished him from others. While he hadn't been particularly exposed to so-called YY novels, his colleagues' children and some of the younger, lower-level employees at the company often read them, so Zhao Hongyu had a rough idea of the subject. He simply couldn't have imagined that such a ridiculous thing would actually happen to him, allowing him to experience it firsthand. This space-time trader, a gift from heaven, which allowed him to trade 21st century products, actually included an option for cultivating genetically modified humans. This was what surprised and astonished Zhao Hongyu the most, because, according to his own understanding, if this thing could truly trade 21st century items, then genetically modified humans shouldn't exist. After all, while genetically modified human technology existed in the 21st century, it wasn't yet fully mature. Therefore, classifying them as tradable products was illogical. But Zhao Hongyu also knew that it was illogical for him to have traveled from the present to the year 1620, possess such a miraculous cheat, and be forcibly imbued with the skill of knowing all languages. Therefore, even if this device he named the Spacetime Trader exhibited some illogicalities, he could only slowly accept them. After all, he was illogical to begin with. After Zhao Hongyu clicked on the Purchase Genetic Human option, a 3D holographic image, visible only to him, appeared before his eyes. Within the vast 3D image, a prompt appeared asking whether to select a genetic race. Zhao Hongyu's mouth twitched, looking at this awful thing with a pang of pain. He still vividly remembered the first month he'd used this feature and been ripped off. The story began 2 months ago, when Zhao Hongyu learned he could purchase genetic humans. He was naturally excited, believing that if used effectively, this feature could give him a reliable team of subordinates. In 1620, having a team was the foundation of survival in America. Life here was always uncertain. Not only did people have to contend with nature, but they also had to guard against all sorts of wild beasts and attacks from other Indian tribes. Sometimes, those Indian tribes would kill you for no apparent reason at all. It could be because of territory, a glance, or simply because they disliked you. Indians were particularly adept at sneak attacks, attacking you when you weren't paying attention. Zhao Hongyu had experienced this firsthand, and the dozens of scars still unhealed on his body were from this experience. So, excitedly, he activated the genetic human purchase feature. But hope is high, reality is low. This option was far from what he had imagined. Zhao Hongyu had lost a month's worth of accumulated trading volume, approximately 800,000 RMB. Recollecting his thoughts, Zhao Hongyu stared solemnly at the endless list of options before him. He didn't want to repeat the same mistake. He had saved over 1.3 million RMB for 2 months. Choose Asian race, Huaxia lineage. Zhao Hongyu carefully selected the options presented. When purchasing a genetic human, the system continuously displays options for selection. Genetics are categorized into two main groups, European and Asian, with further subdivisions within each. Each gene from each lineage will be significantly different upon creation. For example, if you choose to cultivate a French-type human from a European or American lineage, their loyalty will be low and they won't be very proficient in combat, but they will be highly skilled in seducing women. Or, if you choose an American-type human from a European or American lineage, their loyalty will be negligible, and there's a high chance they'll defect and demand the Republic. Before cultivating a genetic human, the function for this option will provide a series of prompts for the purchaser to review. Zhao Hongyu found cultivating this type of human truly frustrating. Therefore, he spent a considerable amount of time researching and ultimately found a race with high loyalty and ease of management, the Huaxia lineage. Originally, Zhao Hongyu wanted to choose an Asian-Japanese race, but when he saw the warning about often rebelling against superiors, he abandoned that option. After comprehensive consideration, the best choice was still the Chinese race. Please select the origin of the person to be cultivated, city, county town, mountain village, etc. Zhao Hongyu saw this option and, after a brief consideration, chose the mountain village option. Zhao Hongyu chose the mountain village option because each option for cultivating a genetically modified person is closely related to the resulting genetically modified person. This affects the cost of the genetically modified person and the abilities they will possess. The most important factor is the cost. Mountain villages, surrounding cities, below county towns, remote areas. Zhao Hongyu, adhering to the principle of saving wherever possible, naturally chose a remote area. Zhao Hongyu was well aware that his financial situation was not very good at the moment, so he preferred to save as much as possible. Wang Ergao, a resident of a village deep in the mountains, had lived in this remote village for generations, the farthest they had ever been to the small county town 80 miles away. A cheesy voiceover, accompanied by a shoddy animation, echoed and played before Zhao Hongyu, making his eyes twitch. Okay, the sex scene's about to begin. Who on earth made this thing, and why is it so painful? Zhao Hongyu had used this feature 2 months ago, so he knew what was coming. In the shoddy animation, a man wearing dark blue patched pants and a ripped quilted vest emerged from a mountain path. He was barefoot, carrying a hoe on his shoulder, and wearing a blue straw hat. This was Wang Ergao, as the voiceover had suggested. Watching this shoddy animation and the man with the abstract face, Zhao Hongyu was at a loss whether to laugh or cry. Although he had experienced something similar 2 months ago, experiencing it again still gave him a stomachache. A classic Picasso-style animation, complete with its voiceover. Ugh! As Wang Ergao emerged from the mountain path, carrying his hoe, he was met by a woman in a flowered jacket. Needless to say, her appearance was also reminiscent of Picasso. The voiceover then chimed in. Li Kehua, Wang Ergao's childhood sweetheart, shared a mutual affection. Ding dong. A selection bar popped up, offering 3 options: 3 pounds of eggs, 3 pounds of pork, or 3 feet of flowered cloth. Zhao Hongyu selected all 3 and confirmed. The system deducted the corresponding amount, effectively sponsoring Wang Ergao and paying court to this village woman named Li Kehua. It was just like picking up girls in real life. Even genetically engineered individuals had to pick up girls first. Zhao Hongyu's face flushed as he looked at Li Kehua's abstract face. He was now brimming with Inner Mongolian ramen. These 3 options wouldn't cost much, they were just trifles after all. With Zhao Hongyu's continued financial support, Li Kehua's favorability towards Wang Ergao finally reached 100 points, allowing them to discuss marriage. However, Zhao Hongyu didn't relax, as he knew a crucial stage was about to begin. As expected, when the system prompted discuss marriage, Li Kehua's mother, with a large black mole at the corner of her mouth, appeared and announced in a voiceover that the other party wanted a 20,000 yuan betrothal gift. 20,000 yuan wasn't much for Zhao Hongyu, who had over 1.3 million yuan. Compared to his first choice of city, which was in the Magic City area, the result was naturally dismal. After spending over 800,000 yuan, the other party immediately demanded a house plus a 500,000 yuan betrothal gift, which Zhao Hongyu cursed. But no matter how much he cursed, the genetic human training ultimately failed. The initial investment of over 800,000 yuan hadn't even made a dent. Learning from this experience, Zhao Hongyu knew it was best not to use the city option unless he had sufficient funds. Tick tick, tick tick. In the 3D animation, Comrade Wang Ergao and Comrade Li Keho finally tied the knot. To facilitate their union, Zhao Hongyu had already paid a 20,000 yuan betrothal gift, as well as 30,000 yuan for Wang Ergao's family to build a new house. This was in a remote rural area, and Zhao Hongyu, watching the dwindling figures in his account, cried out in despair. But he also secretly thanked himself for choosing this option. If he had been asked for a betrothal gift of 3 pounds and 200 yuan, he would have thought he was dead. Voiceover: Wang Ergao and Li Keho entered a happy marriage. A red heart covered the 3D screen, and little angels of numbers darted back and forth. Li Keho is pregnant, and the monthly nutrition allowance is 300 yuan, 500 yuan, or 1,000 yuan. With a ding-dong sound, the selection bar reappeared. Oh my god, why do they even have this thing, and they want me to pay for it? Zhao Hongyu wailed, truly overwhelmed by the system. Whether Zhao Hongyu was willing or not, now that he had come to this point, he had no choice but to give up. If he gave up now, then the initial investment would be wasted, which was the point that Zhao Hongyu criticized the most about this time-space trader. Needless to say, he chose a monthly nutrition fee of 300 yuan and paid for 10 months. After all, it was a remote mountain village, and 300 yuan a month for nutrition was not a lot, which could buy dozens of kilograms of eggs and old hens. Moreover, Zhao Hongyu was worried that there would be various payments to be made later, so he had to start budgeting carefully. According to this payment method, Zhao Hongyu even wondered whether he could create a genetic human with his more than 1.3 million yuan. Oh my god, this is the same as the real life of getting married and having children. Zhao Hongyu looked up at the blue sky and shit. Chapter 3: The First Subordinate. The image flickered, signaling that 10 months had passed and Li Keho was finally due. Zhao Hongyu had chosen to have her childbirth at the shabby village clinic, precisely because it was cheaper. A mere 2,000 yuan was a steal compared to the tens of thousands of yuan a city childbirth would cost. Ding dong. The genetically engineered child has successfully given birth. Please select the appropriate monthly upbringing fee. 500 yuan, 700 yuan, or 1,000 yuan. The shoddy animation freezes on the moment Li Keho happily holds her child. Zhao Hongyu stared at the 3D screen, feeling rather helpless. It seemed that raising a genetically engineered child was essential for its growth. Zhao Hongyu knew that if he didn't pay, the system would deem the purchase a failure, and his investment would be wasted. Zhao Hongyu wasn't about to accept this. From helping Wang Ergao to Li Keho's birth, he'd already spent nearly 60,000 yuan. Even a tiny mosquito is still meat, and he wouldn't accept it being wasted. So, Zhao Hongyu had no choice but to continue paying. He even suspected the person who created this system was a complete con man, otherwise, how could the loops be so tightly linked? It was truly addictive. Fortunately, Zhao Hongyu had carefully prepared his time, with over 1.3 million yuan in capital. He hadn't foolishly chosen the urban option, so he could still support it. Children in remote mountainous areas were easier to raise. They didn't need formula or diapers, they could just breastfeed and use diapers, saving a lot of money. Therefore, 700 yuan a month seemed sufficient to Zhao Hongyu. Wang Ergao and Li Keho's child also had the name Wang Shan, so, from the age of 1 to 7, the child's annual expenses would only be 8,400 yuan. 7 years, that's 58,800 yuan, not a lot. After Zhao Hongyu paid the fee, the image of the Picasso child in the low-quality animation froze. He hadn't grown. The system's options bar continued. The child was ready to go to school. Please pay the fees for the village primary school. Fortunately, this was a remote mountainous area, the teachers were volunteers, and the school was part of the whole project, so the tuition wasn't high. 2 semesters a year was only 1,000 yuan, and the entire elementary school program was only 6,000 yuan. Also, living expenses for these 6 years were calculated separately, so the total for living expenses plus tuition was 50,400 yuan for living expenses and 6,000 yuan for tuition, for a total of 56,400 yuan. Zhao Hongyu covered this, and there were still junior high and high school to worry about. However, because Zhao Hongyu had chosen the remote mountain village model for genetic research, Wang Ergao's child unexpectedly dropped out after completing elementary school, which brought Zhao Hongyu some relief. At this time, Wang Shan was 13 years old. After Wang Ergao's child, Wang Shan, dropped out, he returned home to help his father with the farm. A text, accompanied by a voiceover, appeared before Zhao Hongyu. From the age of 13 to 18, Zhao Hongyu was still responsible for Wang Shan's living expenses, a staggering 8,400 yuan per year. As the saying goes, a young boy eats his father to death, and Wang Shan was growing up during this period, so he was bound to be a voracious eater. With Zhao Hongyu's 700 yuan monthly living allowance, Wang Shan's nutritional needs were adequate. Over 5 years, Wang Shan learned farming skills, and at the age of 18, he responded to the call to join the army. For 3 years, Zhao Hongyu spent nothing, as the army provided food and other supplies. It feels so real. This is probably how the real world is, Zhao Hongyu thought to himself as he listened to the voiceover and read the text before him. 3 years later, Wang Shan was discharged, and the system's options bar reappeared. This time, the low-quality animation still showed Li Kehu holding the newborn Wang Shan. The system prompt read: genetically engineered individuals possess proficient farming skills and basic military knowledge. They can be commissioned at 21 years old, with a useful life of 60 years. It asked whether to accept the offer immediately or wait 21 years. Zhao Hongyu, looking at the prompt and selecting the option, licked his lips. Could this be Wang Shan's upbringing? I've already paid what I owed. If I don't choose to accept the offer immediately, I'll have to wait 21 years. Isn't that just like raising a child? He suddenly realized. Zhao Hongyu wasn't an idiot. How could he possibly wait 21 years? Who knew if he had no subordinates and continued fighting alone for 21 years, he might be overwhelmed by Indians or wild beasts. So, he chose to accept the offer immediately. After Zhao Hongyu selected the option to accept the offer immediately, the screen shifted and a table appeared. Wang Ergo was courting Li Kehu, giving her 5,500 yuan in gifts, including 100 kilograms of eggs, 100 kilograms of pork, and 100 pieces of floral fabric. The total was 5,500 yuan. The bride price was 20,000 yuan. The cost of building a new house is 30,000 yuan, including construction and materials. Wang Shan's upbringing from age 1 to 7. 58,800 yuan. Tuition and upbringing from age 7 to 13. 56,400 yuan. Upbringing from age 13 to 18. 50,400 yuan. Total: 221,100 yuan. Note: to receive the genetic person immediately, please pay the accelerated growth fee. Zhao Hongyu helplessly checked the accelerated growth fee. He didn't want to wait 21 years for a subordinate. However, he had a good understanding of the system. The price didn't always lie. The accelerated growth fee wasn't much, it simply doubled the total cost. Therefore, for 442,200 yuan, Zhao Hongyu could obtain a genetic person with skilled farming skills and basic military abilities. After calculating the figures, Zhao Hongyu felt it was a good deal. Raising a child in the real world does cost hundreds of thousands of yuan. Besides, the genetic person also has farming and basic military skills. Although it was only 3 years of compulsory military service, it was still useful. So, Zhao Hongyu happily paid 442,200 yuan, and a naked young man with thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a simple face appeared out of thin air before him. There was no colorful halo or dazzling milky white light. The geneticist just appeared abruptly. Leader. Wang Shan reports, with his full strength and strong bones, Zhao Hongyu was very satisfied with this geneticist. Record this mode, the system's cold and rigid voice asked. Zhao Hongyu nodded, confirming the decision. Training a geneticist was quite a hassle. The endless stream of questions and options was a real headache. Recording and setting it up was easy. It seemed that sometimes this thing was quite user-friendly. Zhao Hongyu smiled inwardly. However, he quickly came to his senses, because his first geneticist, Wang Shan, was still naked. Looking at the naked Wang Shan, Zhao Hongyu couldn't help but complain, wondering why the system didn't provide clothes. You know, he spent over 400,000 yuan. But even if he complained, Zhao Hongyu had to solve this problem. He exited the genetic human purchase option and went to the livelihood section. Zhao Hongyu's personal attributes appeared in the upper right corner. Name: Zhao Hongyu. Age: 15. Gender: male. Civil affairs level: 15. Farmer. Next level is household head. Please meet the upgrade requirements. Military rank: 012. Soldier. Next rank is squad leader. Please meet the upgrade requirements. Glancing at his attributes, Zhao Hongai was somewhat surprised to find that Wang Shan was classified as a farmer instead of a soldier. Were conscripts not considered soldiers? This intrigued Zhao Hongai. However, Zhao Hongai didn't have the energy to dwell on this issue right now. He had to solve the problem of Wang Shan being naked. Because of his low level, he couldn't buy many things. So, Zhao Hongai could only open the Shansai section and buy a set of clothes. When Zhao Hongai arrived in this era, it was the scorching summer. But it was already late September, almost October, and deep autumn was just around the corner, so the weather was already quite cold. Perhaps it was because it was 1620, before so many factories were emitting fumes. So the end of September was particularly cold. He chose a set of 17th century European-style brown leather jacket and trousers, along with long leather boots. The jacket and trousers were lined with rabbit fur for warmth, as were the boots. To prevent abrasions, Zhao Hongai also bought Wang Shan a linen shirt and trousers. All in all, Zhao Hongai had spent 3,000 yuan. This was considering Zhao Hongai's extensive bison hide collection. The custom-made items only covered the labor costs. Otherwise, this set of leather jacket and boots would have cost him 20,000 yuan. Remember, they were all genuine leather. Genuine leather products in the 21st century are quite expensive. Actually, there were also clothing items in the consumer goods section. Although Zhao Hongai's rank wasn't high, he could still purchase the 1980s green military uniform and coat. However, Zhao Hongai disliked the appearance of the clothes, so he chose not to wear them. Although they were knockoffs, Zhao Hongai specifically requested the craftsmanship and sewing techniques, so Wang Shan's outfit was quite good. He handed Wang Shan a cast iron cross axe and a cast iron machete. Matchlocks are too cumbersome and heavy, and their accuracy is not very high. Sometimes they can't even compare to these cold weapons. Wang Shan nodded, took the axe and slid it into the holster at his waist, and slung the machete across his back. "Chief, where are we going now?" Although Wang Shan's parents look very Picasso-esque in the animation, Wang Shan himself was not too shabby when he appeared. Zhao Hongai said, "I plan to head south. Our forces are very small now, and we must find a place where we can expand." He then explained their current situation and the dangers they might face. Although Wang Shan was a genetically modified human, he possessed normal intelligence. Zhao Hongai also needed to consult with someone. "Chief, your decision is correct. Right now, we have no way of defeating the enemy. The Andal tribe is too small to be a match for the French-backed Maklay tribe. Their defeat is inevitable." Wang Shan had served 3 years as a conscript, so he had a very clear understanding of certain matters. "So, Chief, I suggest you continue to recruit 2 more men," Wang Shan continued his advice. Chapter 4 New York can be mine. Having a subordinate really made a difference. Before, he'd thought about everything on his own, but now with someone to consult with, even the smallest details were clearly brought to his attention and supplemented. Atop a small hill, Zhao Hongai and Wang Shan sat on the ground, the autumn breeze bringing a chill to their faces. Looking out from the hill, all around them was dense forest. One couldn't help but marvel at the sheer abundance of forest resources in the Americas in 1620. This reminded Zhao Hongai of a lesson he'd learned in college. His history teacher had said that the settlers in the Americas in 1620 would constantly burn firewood, even in the summer, believing the forests were so vast that they believed they were inexhaustible. In this way, over the course of 200 years, the Americas' forest resources were practically depleted. "Chief, you still have some money. Even if you recruit 2 more companions, there'll still be some left. Therefore, we won't have any financial problems. And 3 subordinates is always a safer option than just me." Seeing Zhao Hongai fall silent, Wang Shan continued his advice. Wang Shan was entirely concerned for Zhao Hongai. In the Americas of 1620, the dangers they faced weren't just wild beasts and white people, but also those savage Indians. In this land, traveling alone was extremely dangerous. Only in numbers could one truly demonstrate strength. Furthermore, having a large group offered another advantage. It made those seeking trouble think twice. He tallied up his funds and realized he had 1,367,000 yuan in cash. After purchasing Wang Shan and spending 3,000 yuan on his clothing, he still had 921,800 yuan left. Of course, Zhao Hongai didn't need to calculate. He could simply open his virtual bank account to see this information. He realized Wang Shan had a point. His own safety was a major concern, and since he couldn't legally purchase firearms, he needed to have a large group. Therefore, he nodded and agreed to Wang Shan's proposal. Since Wang Shan had set up the mode after purchasing the gun, subsequent purchases were much easier, eliminating the need to constantly pore over the system's selection menus. According to the preset pattern, 5 seconds later, two geneticists, Zhang Tai and Song Hu, with similar origins and experiences to Wang Shan, appeared naked out of thin air. The cost of their creation was the same as Wang Shan's, 442,200 yuan each. Zhao Hongyu also customized each of them with a 17th-century European-style coffee-colored leather jacket, leather pants, and long boots from a knockoff selection. This cost another 3,000 yuan each. At this moment, the balance in Zhao Hongyu's account had completely dwindled. After this round of purchases, Zhao Hongyu's virtual account still had 31,400 yuan. Zhao Hongyu also gained 3 more geneticists under his command. Although they only had 3 years of conscription, it was more than enough for Zhao Hongyu's current needs. It's not that he didn't want powerful special forces soldiers, but who knows how much it would cost to train such geneticists. He didn't want to make a rash choice like the first time and end up wasting over 800,000 yuan. After all, with over 800,000 yuan in cash, how many furs would he have to sell? 31,000 yuan might not seem like a lot, but for Zhao Hongyu, it could do a lot. It would allow him to buy food as he journeyed south. Furthermore, if they encountered other Indians, they could buy some low-quality ironware and trade them for furs. As long as Zhao Hongyu had 100 yuan in his account, they wouldn't starve to death. According to some information I know, the southern British established a colony called Jamestown in 1607, 13 years ago, and called the territory they controlled Virginia. Zhao Hongyu sat on the ground with his 3 geneticists, explaining his historical knowledge. Although Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and Song Hu were geneticists, their loyalty was exceptional, a fact that reassured Zhao Hongyu. Therefore, it wouldn't matter if he divulged a little information to them. Besides, the geneticists were well aware of their secrets. The system hadn't concealed anything from them when it sent them to him. All 3 of them knew their biggest cheat. There was no point in hiding the historical information Zhao Hongyu knew. Meanwhile, the 100 points of loyalty in Wang Shan and the other 3's personal attributes were enough to allay Zhao Hongyu's concerns. Is this the only British stronghold now? Wang Shan asked as Zhao Hongyu finished speaking. Zhao Hongyu pondered for a moment, then shrugged. That's about all I know. As for whether there are other colonies, I really don't know. After all, I only heard a teacher talk about it once in school, so I'm lucky to remember it now. Wang Shan and the other 3 exchanged glances and chuckled. The burly Song Hu said, the leader is far more capable than we are. We only graduated from elementary school and only learned some useful knowledge after 3 years of military service. We're completely clueless about history. He raised his large, fan-like hand, touched the back of his head, and grinned. Wang Shan and Zhang Tai both nodded in agreement, both thinking Zhao Hongyu's ability to figure out this historical information was truly remarkable. The British and French are at odds. They've both been coaxing Indian tribes around their settlements into fighting each other. They've also been constantly attacking Indians in territory controlled by both sides. This presents an opportunity for us. Zhao Hongyu listened to his 3 men's flattery without becoming complacent. Instead, he continued his speech with a serious expression. And the nearest British stronghold isn't Virginia, but Massachusetts and Plymouth Bay. At this point, Zhao Hongyu thought of the Mayflower and its settlers. But then, Zhao Hongyu's brow furrowed again. He'd realized there might be a flaw in his previous information. Wang Shan noticed Zhao Hongyu's frown and asked, Chief, is there something wrong? Zhang Tai and Song Hu also looked over silently. Zhao Hongyu said, perhaps I was wrong about something. There's probably no colony in Massachusetts yet. According to my history, it was the 2nd British colony on the American continent, and it was established in December 1620 by immigrants aboard the Mayflower. But it's only the end of September. Zhao Hongyu smiled wryly as he glanced at the faces of Sanming's men. So, the British only have 1 stronghold, Virginia, and the Massachusetts stronghold won't be established for another 3 months, Song Hu asked in a muffled voice. If history isn't wrong, then that's exactly what happened, Zhao Hongyu replied with a wry smile. He had originally planned to find the nearest British stronghold from here. But if Massachusetts wasn't established yet, he'd have to go to Virginia. That would be a very long journey. After all, He was currently in what would later become Canada, near Quebec City. The journey from here to the United States was truly immense. Especially during this process, who knows what kind of dangers he might encounter. But he had to leave, because Buffalo of the Andal tribe said that the French and the Moquet tribe were after his life, and the surrounding Indian tribes would surely come after him for the French's benefit. Therefore, he had to leave. Chief, why bother worrying so much? I may only have an elementary school education, but I know that in this era, whoever occupies the land owns it. It doesn't matter that we're small in number now. With gradual development, we might become a regional hegemon. Wang Shen and his companions had received a modern education. However, to ensure their loyalty, they were systematically indoctrinated and brainwashed. Therefore, Wang Shen and his companions knew some history. Moreover, after 3 years of conscripted service, they had all developed a certain cynicism. As soon as Wang Shen spoke, Zhang Tai and Song Hu agreed. Song Hu snorted, "If the British and French can occupy this area, why can't we? Chief, I support you. We have the artifact, so what are we afraid of? Then we can defeat the French and the British and take control of the entire American continent." His eyes twinkled as he spoke. Zhang Tai nodded and said, "Instead of surrendering to the British, why not find a place to develop secretly? With the chief's artifact, we can befriend some Indian tribes and sell them muskets. Like the British and French, we can let the Indians conquer our territory." Even geneticists, educated in the 21st century, are extraordinary. Watching the three chattering, Zhao Hongai nodded with satisfaction. Compared to those dull geneticists who only knew how to follow orders, geneticists like Wang Shen and his companions were more to Zhao Hongai's liking. Especially with their guaranteed loyalty, Zhao Hongai was even more satisfied. "Do you have any good suggestions?" Zhao Hongai asked, sitting there, pulling out a pack of yellow Crane Tower 1918 cigarettes he bought from the trading device. He lit it, took a deep drag, and exhaled a silent smoke ring. "After hearing what you said, I also think that going to the British is not a bad idea. The trading device I have is more than enough to meet our development needs." Wang Shen and the other two brightened up at Zhao Hongai's words. The somewhat naive Song Hu grinned, "Captain, we could go to New York. It's not too far, and they could even build a port there." Zhao Hongai handed his pack of cigarettes to Wang Shen, inviting them to share one. After 3 years of conscripted service, it was impossible not to smoke. At Song Hu's words, Zhao Hongai was stunned for a moment, then his mind raced, pondering the feasibility of Song Hu's suggestion of going to New York. After all, there wasn't even a New York yet. The British only had one state in the Americas, Virginia, and it would be 3 months before immigrants arrived for the second state, Massachusetts. As for Pennsylvania and the like, there's not even a shadow of it now. Perhaps, I can really make New York my own territory. Zhao Hongai took a deep puff of his cigarette. Chapter 5 Loyalty Bonus. Zhao Hongai picked up a small branch and began to draw on the ground. In a short while, he had traced a map of the eastern coastline of the United States from memory. If only I could buy a 21st century map. My level isn't high enough right now, otherwise it would save a lot of trouble, Zhao Hongai thought to himself with a sigh. Yes, his level wasn't very high right now, so many 21st century products weren't available, which made him a little disappointed. Currently, the only consumer goods available were low-quality cast iron knives and axes, pots and farm tools, and at best, some rice seeds. He couldn't even buy salt. Fortunately, even cast iron products could be exchanged for furs from the Indians, allowing him to trade smoothly. But such transactions were too limited, and he needed to find a source of income. Looking at his stats, Zhao Hongai pondered. Military products were still a distant prospect for him. Who knew how much it would cost to buy 12 genetically modified soldiers? He was running low on cash. Fortunately, the copycat option did allow for the creation of a 17th century matchlock rifle. However, it was heavy, difficult to use, and lacked accuracy, making it a poor choice. However, the copycat option offered investment. For a mere 3 million yuan, the system would automatically generate a flintlock production line, complete with papermaking. Zhao Hongai's entire capital was currently invested in producing genetically modified humans. Therefore, the flintlock rifle would take a while to produce. However, once he had a place to settle down, he could sell the matchlock, a weapon he despised, to the Indians. During his 3 months in the Andal tribe, Zhao Hongyu had learned that the French could trade a matchlock rifle for a pile of furs the length of the rifle's length. This trade was incredibly profitable. Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and Song Hu, the three geneticists, saw their leader draw a map on the ground and then lost consciousness. They were unsure what had happened. "Chief, what's on your mind?" Finally, Wang Shan mustered up the courage to ask, bringing Zhao Hongyu back to his senses. "Oh, nothing, I was just distracted." Zhao Hongyu, drawing his thoughts back, blushed awkwardly. He glanced at the faces of the three genets beside him, seeing them staring at him intently. "Chief, what is this map?" Song Hu asked in a muffled voice. "Look," Zhao Hongyu pointed at the map drawn on the ground with his branch. "This is Quebec City, founded by the French over a decade ago, and this is the St. Lawrence River Basin connecting to Lake Ontario. If I'm correct, then we should be here." The three genets looked down, following the direction of Zhao Hongyu's branch. "We should be between Quebec and Montreal in the 21st century, close to the St. Lawrence River." Zhao Hongyu's judgment was not surprising, as there was indeed a river 3 kilometers to the north. This was an area frequented by beavers and a battleground for the Andalou and Mokal tribes. This area has become a battlefield, and besides the Mokal tribe, I suspect other tribes will be drawn into this conflict in the future. The French have no good intentions. Besides wanting to monopolize the fur trade, they also harbor the desire to weaken the Indians. Wang Shan and the other three nodded silently as they listened. They all agreed with their leader, Zhao Hongyu's assessment. "We're still too weak to participate," Zhao Hongyu said, his face etched with dejection. He had his own concerns. After all, monopolizing the fur trade would benefit him. While he possessed a magic weapon, he wasn't high enough, lacking weapons of mass destruction, and thus truly wasn't qualified to participate. Furthermore, he lacked sufficient manpower. It was impossible for him to accomplish this alone. Zhao Hongyu finished his words, swiping the branch in his hand, pointing to the east of the map. "So, we must move south and find a foothold on the eastern coastline of the American continent." Zhao Hongyu's expression was serious. "You're right, New York is a good place," Zhang Tai then spoke up. "From the map the leader drew, it looks quite far." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhao Hongyu nodded and said, "Yes, I estimate it's at least 1,300 miles. But we have to get there, because it's absolutely suitable for us to settle down." The three geneticists didn't ask why. Their leader, Zhao Hongyu, had already made the decision, so they simply followed through. Although they were intelligent and educated in the 21st century, they had been instilled with a sense of loyalty by the system, so they wouldn't object. "Then it's decided. We'll establish ourselves in New York." Zhao Hongyu stood up and shouted ambitiously to his three men. "As you command." Wang Shan and the other two also stood up and shouted in unison. Zhao Hongyu and his men didn't bother to greet each other, so after making their decision, they left the hill and headed south. Although the journey was a bit long, there was no need to worry about food and drink. Some junk food could be purchased in the space-time trader. While it wasn't particularly good, it wouldn't starve us to death. Since there weren't any luxury options available, Zhao Hongyu and the others wouldn't be picky. Everyone understood this. The four figures disappeared into the dense southern forest. No one knew what the future of America would hold. From this moment on, history took an uncharted path. Name, Wang Shan. Age, 21. Gender, male. Attributes, farming skilled, basic military knowledge. Nationality, Chinese. Loyalty, 10,020, same ancestry as the purchaser, 20% bonus to loyalty. Name, Zhang Tai. Age, 21. Gender, male. Attributes, farming skilled, basic military knowledge. Nationality, Chinese. Loyalty, 10,020, same ancestry as the purchaser, 20% bonus to loyalty. Name, Song Hu. Age, 21. Gender, male. Attributes, farming skilled, basic military knowledge. Nationality, Chinese. Loyalty, 10,020, same ancestry as the purchaser, 20% bonus to loyalty. Time passed quickly, and it was already 2 months later. Winter had already arrived in the Americas. Heavy snow fell from the sky, and Zhao Hongyu and his three companions struggled through the waist-deep snow. Along the way, Zhao Hongyu checked the attribute columns of his three subordinates. He was surprised to find a bonus on the last item. High loyalty is a good thing. It means the chance of defection is low, ensuring his safety. This made Zhao Hongyu feel fortunate for his original choice. He even wondered if he had chosen European or Japanese ancestry. Would he have been overthrown by the Republican Party or even by the enemy? He also checked his own attributes. Name, Zhao Hongyu. Age, 15. Gender, male. Civil affairs level, 35. Farmer, next level is household head. Please meet the upgrade requirements. Military rank, 012. Soldier, next rank is squad leader. Please meet the upgrade requirements. Daily items, matches, wooden bowls and plates. Invest 10 million yuan to produce new products. Iron items, cast iron axe, cast iron knife, cast iron pot, cast iron dagger, cast iron machete. Invest 10 million yuan to produce new products. Military production line, not enabled due to insufficient level. Invest 10 million yuan to produce new products. Biopharmaceutical products, penicillin, saline solution. Invest 10 million yuan to produce new products. Food products, fueling pickled mustard tubers, Red Star Erguo Tao, bulk rice. Invest 10 million yuan to produce new products. Apparel products, cotton military coats, pants, leather boots. Green canvas messenger bag, labor protection equipment. Invest 10 million yuan to produce new products. Copycat product. 17th century matchlock rifle. Invest 3 million yuan to develop a flintlock rifle. New features not yet developed. Please work hard. Damn it. After reviewing his stats, Zhao Hongyu cursed under his breath. But cursing wouldn't change anything. The winter of 1620 was much colder than the 21st century. There was no greenhouse effect back then, let alone warm winters. 3 months had passed, and even Zhao Hongyu didn't know where they were. During those 3 months, they had encountered quite a few Indian tribes. However, out of caution, they avoided contact with the Indian tribes and instead took a detour. Indeed, caution was crucial. Who knew what trouble would arise from rashly contacting these Indians? So it was better to stay hidden, it was safer. Since arriving in this era, Zhao Hongyu hadn't had a smooth sailing. His only consolation was that he had grown significantly younger. 15 years old was the equivalent of 20 extra years of life. Chief, there are a lot of coyotes around here. Should we camp here? Wang Shan approached, whispering to Zhao Hongyu about the situation. Damn. So many coyotes. The sheer number of coyotes in the Americas had truly amazed Zhao Hongyu. They were practically everywhere. Little did Zhao Hongyu know that coyotes would be extinct within the next 300 years, driven by the dislike of European immigrants and Americans. Chief, I've observed. These coyotes are solitary, not social, so we're relatively safe, Wang Shan said. Zhao Hongyu looked up at the sky and found it was still bright, so he shook his head and said, it's still early. Let's continue on our way. Are you tired? If so, it's okay for us to take a break. Trekking through the waist-deep snow was tiring and Zhao Hongyu guessed that his 3 men might be a little tired. Wang Shan shook his head. We are not tired, but you are young, Chief, and we are afraid that you can't handle it. Wang Shan's face was full of concern. Zhang Tai and Song Hu also echoed his words. Zhao Hongyu, who had turned from 36 to 15 years old, looked like a little brother who needed protection to these 3 men. This made Zhao Hongyu moved, but also a little amused. Suddenly, Song Hu became alert. There seems to be someone up ahead. Chapter 6 Welcome, friends from afar. Zhao Hongyu and his 3 companions were currently resting on a vast plain. Ahead of them, a dense forest loomed. To rest, Song Hu had dug a pit in the snow, sheltering them from the wind and snow. Therefore, if they weren't careful, the 4 of them would remain completely invisible. While they wouldn't be seen, that didn't mean they wouldn't notice others. Song Hu, who is on guard, made a discovery. There's movement, Song Hu reported softly, quickly grabbing the cross axe on his thigh and the machete behind his back. He then poked his head out of the way, staring intently ahead. With Song Hu's warning, Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and the other 2 climbed out of the snow pit, slowly crawling to a nearby location and concealing themselves, gradually covering themselves with snow. Zhao Hongyu, too, grew nervous. He also grabbed the machete behind him, slowly peeking out and looking in the direction of Song Hu's gaze. That's impossible. Indians generally don't come out in winter. That doesn't make sense, Zhao Hongyu muttered to himself, recalling a book he'd read written by a European about the colonial period in the Americas. The author explicitly stated that due to limited productivity, Indians couldn't produce cold weather clothing, so they stayed in their tents during the winter to reduce the heat loss from going out. Winter, however, was also great news for the colonists. Since the Indians didn't come out in the winter, their safety was no longer a concern. The colonists' greatest fear was the spring and autumn months, when the Indians could move freely. Since 1492, relations between Indians and European settlers had been strained. Killings were commonplace. It was either you kill me or I kill you. Before the 18th century, there wasn't much difference in the armed forces of Indians and European settlers. Indians had the advantage of numbers, while Europeans had the advantage of muskets and other advanced weaponry. But overall, the Indians dominated the Europeans. Unfortunately, the Indians' internal strife was exploited by the Europeans, ultimately leading to their gradual demise. A book even describes how a united Indian tribe destroyed over 50 of the 88 British settlements in the Americas in a single summer, striking fear into the hearts of Europeans. This is a true example of what happened in the second half of the 17th century. Therefore, it's true that the Indians weren't powerful. The North American Indians were far braver and more ruthless than the Incas of Central America. Of course, as the Indians fought among themselves and were instigated by Europeans to fight each other, the Industrial Revolution in Europe brought about a significant advancement in technology. With the emergence of more powerful weapons, the Indians declined. Regardless, in the 17th century, roughly 1600 to 1699, Europeans remained deeply afraid of the Indians. Even when the ice and snow melted in spring, every European settlement was in a state of constant fear. The term Indian summer was a warning given by the elders of the American settlements to every newcomer. Thinking of this, Zhao Hongyu wondered what Song Hu had discovered. Perhaps, a wild animal. Following Song Hu's gaze, he saw two young Indian men, dressed in animal skins and with feathers tucked into their hair, hunting a coyote on the snow-covered plain. The waist-deep snow restricted the coyote's movements. It had already been struck by several arrows and was on the verge of collapse. However, its instinct for survival compelled it to flee forward. The two young Indian men were hot on its heels. The direction the coyote was heading was exactly where Zhao Hongyu and his companions were resting. That's not right. Could that book be wrong? Aren't Indians supposed to go out on the winter? And the Indian tribes I've encountered along the way all huddled together in their tents for warmth, Zhao Hongyu muttered to himself as he watched the two young Indian men chasing the coyote. The coyote was exhausted, its wounds straining its strength, and the constant flow of blood was putting its lifeline on the line. As if aware of its impending doom, the coyote bared its teeth and turned back, ready to fight for its life. However, the two Indian youths were clearly determined not to let the coyote succeed. Whoosh! Another arrow pierced the coyote's throat, its powerful momentum carrying it to the snow pit where Zhao Hongyu had rested. The two Indian youths approached with a relaxed expression. The fallen coyote was no longer in danger. If they approached, they would surely discover Zhao Hongyu and Song Hu. Would such a sudden arrival lead to misunderstandings and conflict? You are from that tribe? Don't misunderstand. We are just passing through. Finally, Zhao Hongyu, left with no other options, could only squat in the snow pit and shout loudly in Indian. The sudden sound startled the two Indian youths. The two of them leaped a short distance away, simultaneously drawing their bows and arrows, and nervously surveyed their surroundings. Clang! Before they could register anything, Wang Shen and Zhang Tai leaped from the snow and tackled the two men from behind. With a cold, low-quality iron dagger pressed to their throats, even a fool knew what to do. While Wang Shen and Zhang Tai restrained the two Indians, Song Hu and others swiftly emerged from the snow pit and approached the two young Indians. They quickly removed their bows and arrows, and the axes from their waists, discarding them aside. Once the threat was completely eliminated, Zhao Hongyu finally climbed out of the pit. We have no ill intentions. We're just trying to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings, Zhao Hongyu said sincerely in Indian, walking up to the two young Indians and standing in front of them. He waved his hand, asking Zhang Tai and Wang Shan to release the two men. They did as instructed, but Zhang Tai and Wang Shan remained vigilantly watching them from behind, not letting up a bit. Although they had been released, the eyes of the two young Indians were still filled with anger, hatred, and fear. We are a tribe from the north. Our tribe was attacked by the Makla tribe, and I got separated from my tribe. Zhao Hongyu's lies flowed freely, without even needing to draft them. He vividly described his tribe's ambush by the Makla tribe and their oppression by the French. As he spoke, the two young men's expressions gradually relaxed. Atito and Ruzaba were the names of the two young Indians. After Zhao Hongyu's explanations and overtures, they had become friends. The two young Indians were not very old, one 19 and the other 24. Although Zhao Hongyu's appearance was somewhat unusual, he was not white after all. He also spoke fluent Indian, which was enough to gain the two young Indians' trust. Especially after Zhao Hongyu took out a box of matches, demonstrated it, and gave each of them a box, the two young Indians immediately treated Zhao Hongyu as a brother. Originally, we wouldn't have gone out during this cold winter. But my father is ill, seriously. The tribal shaman said that if I could possess a coyote heart, perhaps he would recover. Atiro, the younger Indian youth, spoke with a sorrowful expression as he and Ruziba went out to hunt wolves in winter. The book Zhao Hongyu had read was indeed correct. Indians didn't go out in winter because the weather was too cold. They had fur clothing, but it wasn't really clothing. It was shoddy workmanship, just pieces of fur cobbled together, offering no protection from the cold at all. Atito's face was frozen purple, and Zhao Hongyu couldn't help but marvel at the Indians' resilience in those days. Led by two young Indians, Zhao Hongyu and the other three arrived at their tribe. Zhao Hongyu also learned the name of the tribe the two youths belonged to. Mohican. Upon learning the name, Zhao Hongyu felt a surge of excitement. He knew he was probably near New York. The Mohawk tribe settled on the plains to the left of Manhattan Island in New York. As for how Zhao Hongyu could possibly know so much, it was thanks to a colleague who was Native American during his company's assignment in the United States. Thus, he learned a great deal about Native American history from his colleague. Atito led Zhao Hongyu into the center of the tribe, to the largest and tallest triangular tent. Please come in, brother from afar. Just keep your voice down. My father is not well, Atito said, approaching the tent, lifting the fur curtain and gesturing. Zhao Hongyu nodded and followed Atito inside. Wow! What a strong smell! Upon entering the tent, Zhao Hongyu was overcome by the sour stench. These days, Native American hygiene is truly unacceptable. Once inside, Atito chatted with a man with a heavily painted face, then handed him the coyote he had brought back. Atito then pointed at Zhao Hongyu and the other three and motioned them over. Zhao Hongyu knew the man was probably the wizard. Friends from afar, the Moxigan tribe welcomes you. The wizard lowered his head and whispered in the ear of the old patriarch, who could barely open his eyes. The old patriarch reluctantly gave a greeting. Atito then led Zhao Hongyu and the others aside and watched the wizard heal the patriarch. Chapter 7 It's better to give it a try. The old chief lay on a wooden bed in the center, padded with thick animal fur. Several Indian women, under the direction of a shaman dressed like a peacock, circled the old chief, shaking their bodies. After about 5 or 6 circles, the women stretched out their arms and began waving them back and forth in front of the recumbent chief. Zhao Hongyu knew this was a form of Indian witchcraft, used to cure illness. If anyone used this method on Zhao Hongyu, he would surely have been beaten. However, in 1620, the Indians of the Americas held a deep faith in witchcraft. The shaman kept muttering something unintelligible even to his own tribe, raising his hands and stamping his feet, his voice rising and falling with his movements. Isn't this just a ritual of shamanism? We have it in northeast China too, and it's much more interesting than the sorcerers, the somewhat naive Song who touched his nose and whispered as he watched the sorcerer's performance. SHH, don't talk nonsense. We're in someone else's tribe, Zhao Hongyu chided Song Hu softly. Song Hu chuckled and finally shut up, but his expression showed his genuine disdain for the sorcerer's performance. Zhao Hongyu was puzzled. How could this genetic person inside the time-space trading device even know about shamanism? It was too amazing. Atito didn't notice the little movements of Zhao Hongyu and the other three. His eyes were fixed on his father, who had begun to faint. His father was the leader of the tribe, and if anything went wrong, he could inherit his father's legacy. But he wouldn't curse his father over such a relationship. He knew full well that he was too young. He worried that if something happened to his father, he wouldn't be able to carry on the tribal leadership after inheriting it. Atito also faced opposition within the tribe, which Atito might not be able to subdue. Across from Atito sat a stern-eyed, bald man with a bow necklace around his neck. His name was Black Bear, the tribe's most formidable warrior. Many young men idolized him. Black Bear often clashed with his father over ideological differences. Fortunately, his father's high prestige kept Black Bear in check. But if his father were gone, Black Bear would likely cause trouble. Atito's fears were not unfounded, as Black Bear was also well-liked. Without his father's restraint, Black Bear would become the new leader. Where would he lead the tribe? Atito knew that Black Bear had always been hostile to the Whiteskins, believing them to be bad guys. He disapproved of dealing with them and even threatened to lead the tribe's warriors into war against them. Unfortunately, Black Bear's idea was completely rejected by his father. Because of his father's prestige, the younger members of the tribe suppressed the idea. However, Black Bear's idea was not without support within the tribe. If Zhao Hongyu knew Black Bear's thoughts and the plan he was pursuing, he might even applaud. Zhao Hongyu was quite pleased to see the emergence of this angry Indian. Atito understood Black Bear. His son had been killed by the whites. It was no wonder he hated them so much. It was revenge for his son's death. And his daughter, too, had strayed into the whites' camp that autumn, ignoring their warnings and being wounded by a noisy weapon. Now, his little girl's wound had completely festered, and if she didn't receive treatment, her leg might be lost. Losing her leg was a minor concern. The most worrying thing was the death of her beloved Emma. Black Bear was these two children, and now his son was dead. If his daughter died again, he would go mad. Now that his father had faced this situation, there was no guarantee Black Bear wouldn't become chief after his father's death and lead the tribe in revenge. Atito understood Black Bear very well, but as his father had said, the whites' weapons were formidable. Furthermore, they lived behind wooden fences, making it a heavy price for the Mohawk warriors to conquer them. And if they conquered the whites' stronghold, the Mohawks themselves would suffer heavy casualties. This would undoubtedly attract the attention of rival tribes, so sometimes personal vendettas trumped the tribe's own. Knowing his father's concerns, Atito was so worried. Unfortunately, Black Bear, blinded by hatred, ignored all else. Now he waited, waiting for his father to die. Zhao Hongyu paid no attention to the affairs of the Mohawk tribe, as they had no bearing on him. He stole a glance at the old chief lying in the center, noticing bloodshot eyes and a hint of blue on his lips. He wondered what illness the old Mohawk leader had contracted. At that moment, the Indian women surrounding the old chief gathered some plants from the ground and began to light them. Thick white smoke billowed from the plants, roasting the old leader's body. "He's almost dying, and you're still using smoke. You think he's not dying slowly enough," Zhao Hongyu complained inwardly. "Atito, what's your father's illness? Tell me about it. I have a medicine that might be able to cure him." Zhao Hongyu watched these people so recklessly disregard human life, and finally, unable to resist, he pulled Atito aside and whispered something to him. Zhao Hongyu's reason for this was because he could buy penicillin on the space-time trader. He suspected the old chief might have fallen ill in the winter, perhaps catching a bad cold that went untreated, causing inflammation. Or perhaps a wound had become inflamed, leading to his current condition. If his guess was right, he could establish a good relationship. Even if it wasn't, it didn't matter, he could just leave it to the wizard. Although the Indians of that era were quite barbaric, if they recognized you as their friend, they would go to war with other tribes just for you. This was something Zhao Hongyu admired deeply about the Indians. Furthermore, Zhao Hongyu also considered another issue. If this was truly within the New York area, then establishing good relations with a Mohawk tribe would be crucial. With the friendship of the outer Mohawk tribes, he could slowly expand along the New York coast. Before following Atito back to the tribe, he had learned from Atito that the Mohawk tribe was the largest in the entire area, with a population of over 13,000. To Zhao Hongyu now, the Mohawk tribe was a formidable force. He would be foolish not to embrace it. A tribe of 13,000 people was the undisputed leader in the area. The smaller Indian tribes around them would not dare to offend them. At the same time, the British were actively courting the Mohawk tribe, not daring to neglect them in the slightest. Of course, Zhao Hongyu knew the British had no ulterior motives in courting the Mohawk. They were simply using them as a pretext to weaken their power. Zhao Hongyu knew something about the Mohawks' development. Over 100 years later, the vast Mohawk tribe was destroyed during the 7 Years' War between England and France. Note, this is not true history. The author fabricated it based on the film The Last of the Mohawks. Regardless, that was over 100 years later, and the Mohawk tribe was now the undisputed leader of the region. My father had been running hot and cold for the past few days. He forced himself to hold on for a few days, and now he's like this. He even occasionally talks nonsense at night, Atito replied quietly. Then his eyes flashed. Brother, do you have medicine? Are you a shaman from your tribe? Atito believed that anyone who mastered the art of healing must be a shaman. Because it wasn't just in the Mohawk tribe, all Indian tribes had shamans who could heal. Hot and cold, and talking nonsense at night. After hearing Atito's answer, Zhao Hongyu understood a lot. According to Atito, this was just a case of a bad cold that hadn't been properly treated. God help me! Zhao Hongyu exclaimed in his heart. My father was both the chief and shaman of my tribe, so I learned this from him. Zhao Hongyu thought of a plan and looked at Atito seriously. Your father's illness has also happened to others in our tribe. It needs prompt and proper treatment, otherwise it can be fatal. A bad cold can lead to complications, and in severe cases, it can certainly be fatal. Zhao Hongyu didn't lie to Atito. If Atito's father's cold truly caused the inflammation, then penicillin could indeed be treated. Zhao Hongyu was very confident of this. If 21st century penicillin couldn't save an Indian chieftain who had a bad cold in 1620, it would be a joke. Of course, unless Zhao Hongyu was truly unlucky and Atito's father was allergic to penicillin, then there was truly no other option. Atito, if you trust me and let me treat him, I guarantee your father will recover by tomorrow. After a rough assessment, Zhao Hongyu made a serious promise to Atito. Atito pursed his lips, unsure whether to trust this outsider. But as his gaze swept over the wizard, whose expression dimmed, his eyes filled with sorrow, he made a decision. The wizard had told him that his father was dying. So, it made sense to give this outsider a try. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8 Ahaha, Penicillin. Atito found the wizard and relayed Zhao Hongyu's words, expressing his desire for Zhao Hongyu to give it a try. While the wizard felt it was risky for an outsider, seeing the old chieftain dying, it made sense to let him try. Try to save a dying horse, there's always hope. Of course, the old Indian wizard wouldn't understand the phrase, but the meaning was pretty much the same. Besides, Zhao Hongyu, the son of a tribal chief and wizard, was trying to convince Atito that he could learn a few tricks. Indians of that era were still quite naive. In the 21st century, Zhao Hongyu's words would have been unbelievable. But Atito and the wizard believed them. When the wizard agreed, Zhao Hongyu stood up and walked over to the dazed old chieftain. He placed his hand on his forehead to check the temperature, then lifted his eyelids to examine him. Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and Song Hu followed. Although they only had elementary school education, they had served 3 years as conscripts, tempered in the melting pot of a virtual army. Therefore, they knew a bit about first aid. Chief, this old man looks like he has a severe cold with complications. If he's not treated, he could develop pneumonia or even die. After examining him for a moment, Wang Shan offered his assessment. Zhang Tai and Song Hu nodded. The conversation caught the attention of all the Indians in the tent. However, they simply assumed they were discussing the old chief's illness and treatment methods, and they were not wrong. It was just that they couldn't understand the language spoken by Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and Song Hu, which caused some confusion. However, the Indians soon relaxed. Not being able to understand other tribes' languages was normal, considering the sheer number of Indian tribes on this continent. Almost every tribe had its own unique language. Only tribes living in the same area would share some language, but there would also be significant differences. Therefore, the Indians in the tent were not suspicious. Wang Shan and the other 3 were considered Zhao Hongyu's apprentices by the old wizard, as they all had followers learning witchcraft from him. My brother, how is he? Is there any hope for my father? Atito couldn't help but ask after listening to Zhao Hongyu and the others' conversation for a while. It was a matter of life and death, so it was natural for his son to be concerned. Zhao Hongyu paused his conversation with Wang Shan and the others and looked at Atito, who looked anxious. We just discussed it and believe your father's condition may have been caused by the cold, along with some changes in his body. I'm quite confident he can be cured. Yes, after discussing it with Wang Shan and the others, everyone agreed that Atito's father had a severe cold with complications of inflammation. This illness wasn't serious, but it was nothing in the 21st century. However, this was 1620, and this was an American Indian tribe. In that era, a cold could still be fatal, whether in China or Europe. Really, Atito's eyes widened, a look of delight on his face. He felt like today was his lucky day, perhaps a blessing from Quetzalcoatl. This brother he knew not only gave him some handy little sticks for making fire, but he even managed to save his father. It seemed like having him as a brother was truly a good thing, Atito thought. Of course, it was too early to think about this now. Everything would have to wait until Zhao Hongyu truly saved his father. Brother, if you truly save my father, I, Atito, will bring my warriors to help you avenge your father. Atito looked at Zhao Hongyu seriously and made his promise. But Atito was quite clever. He only mentioned bringing his warriors to help Zhao Hongyu, not the entire Mohegan tribe. It seemed he knew his place. As Native Americans, they didn't have a highly developed culture or knowledge, so they couldn't really express anything like repaying a favor with a favor, but for the simple-minded Atito, this was the only promise he could make to repay Zhao Hongyu. Hearing this, Zhao Hongyu smiled. Atito, I will resolve our tribe's feud myself. You won't be helping me. I'm saving your father because you told me I was your brother on the way. As a brother, what's wrong with me doing this? Zhao Hongyu's smile was hypocritical, but Atito fell for it. If I use something like this to blackmail you into helping me with my revenge, the gods won't forgive me, Zhao Hongyu said, looking up at the tent ceiling with a charade. Hearing Zhao Hongyu's words, Atito felt ashamed of his own thoughts, but his conviction only solidified. Zhao Hongyu was his true brother, and no one would bully him from now on. Not only Atito, but even the old wizard standing nearby couldn't help but admire Zhao Hongyu's virtue. Now wasn't the time for showmanship. Zhao Hongyu had to quickly save Atito's father. Saving the old man would secure his own place in the region. As long as they could cling to an Indian tribe of over 13,000 people as their golden thigh, they could easily expand their business. Zhao Hongyu secretly purchased penicillin and saline solution from the space-time exchange. The purchase also included a set of injection equipment, which saved him a lot of trouble. Wang Shan assisted, and in a short while, the bottle of saline solution containing the penicillin was hung up. Wow, hiss! Inside the tent, the Indians exclaimed in amazement upon seeing what Zhao Hongyu had brought out and what they had done to the old chief. This method of treatment was something they had never seen, let alone heard of. Everything was a bit shocking to them. Especially that transparent object, filled with a liquid that looked like water, and the thin, transparent tube inserted into the old chief's hand. And could it be like this? People are always curious and awed by the unknown. In their eyes, Zhao Hongyu's father must be a great sorcerer. Otherwise, they wouldn't have thought of using such a method to treat illnesses. Of course, the effectiveness of this method would only be determined by the results. The old shaman from the Mohawk tribe was particularly shocked. He was completely unfamiliar with the method Zhao Hongyu was using. Even the surrounding tribesmen didn't know how to use it. Could this outsider's tribe be truly powerful? The old shaman already accepted Zhao Hongyu's claim that he was the son of a powerful tribal leader. If he weren't the son of a tribal leader and shaman, how could he possibly possess such skills? Little did he know that Zhao Hongyu had been completely alone just 3 months prior. 6 months into his life, he only had 3 subordinates. As for his father and his tribe, those were completely fabricated stories. However, Zhao Hongyu wouldn't admit it. Penicillin powder mixed with saline solution slowly flowed through the IV into Atito's father, who was already semi-conscious. Testing revealed that Atito's father was fortunately not allergic to penicillin, which made Zhao Hongyu breathe a sigh of relief and relax. Since people in 1620 had little resistance to drugs, Zhao Hongyu believed penicillin would be much more effective than it would be in the 21st century. After all, unlike the 21st century, people of that era weren't exposed to a wide variety of contaminated foods, medications, and even gutter oil from childhood. As time passed, Atito's father's face, tense with pain, relaxed, evidently showing the drug's effects were taking effect. Seeing the old man's face relax, Zhao Hongyu's frown also relaxed. Huh? He let out a soft breath. Now he had to wait for him to wake up. Zhao Hongyu knew that since Atito's father had just begun to recover, he might take a nap. After all, he had been suffering for days, and he must be exhausted. When will my father be well? Atito saw the relief on his father's face, and he knew his brother's method was likely working. Your father will need to be under observation for a while. My men and I will stay here to watch over him, so don't worry. According to my estimation, your father will probably wake up tomorrow. He needs rest now. Zhao Hongyu recalled his own cold in the past and recounted it to Atito. Okay, I'll stay with you to watch over my father. Atito nodded. Zhao Hongyu suggested to Atito, you could send these people back. This will allow the air in the tent to circulate more, which will help your father recover faster. Besides, they're useless staying here now. Indeed, with so many people here, the air in the tent was extremely murky. This wouldn't help Tito's father's condition at all, and it might even cause others to catch a cold as well. Colds are contagious, after all. Of course, the Indians had no knowledge of this, and Zhao Hongyu couldn't explain it clearly to them. But since the old chief's condition was a concern, everyone obeyed and left the tent. After they left, the air in the tent indeed became much clearer, no longer as murky. Zhao Hongyu instructed Wang Shan to carry Tito's father down from the center of the tent and place him on a thick fur mat nearby. He then covered him with several pieces of leather to keep him warm. Now, all Zhao Hongyu could do was wait for Tito's father to rest and wake up. Chapter 9, Pickled Mustard Tuber, 50 cents a bag. Tito's father, the old chief of the Mohawk tribe, slept soundly nearby. He had been tormented by illness for days, and now he finally had a restful sleep. Listening to his father's occasional snoring, Tito felt as if he were listening to beautiful music. "Brother, my father looks much better now." "Thank you so much," Tito said to Zhao Hongyu with a sincere look. "It's a small matter. We are brothers. In my tribe, friends and brothers are bound by life and death, so treating your father is nothing." Tito inquired about the meaning of bound by life and death. After receiving an explanation from Zhao Hongyu, he patted his chest and promised Zhao Hongyu that he would do the same in the future. Zhao Hongyu believed Tito's promise. The Native Americans of the American continent in 1620 were far more reassuring than people in the 21st century. If someone in the 21st century had said such words to him, Zhao Hongyu would not have believed it. It was a materialistic age, where people cared only about money, and trust and loyalty had long been cast aside. "We're brothers, no need to say that." Zhao Hongyu smiled, raised his hand, and gently patted Tito's shoulder, implying that he didn't care much about it. He was helping Tito simply because, as he said, they were brothers. It was a pity that Zhao Hongyu and Tito had only met for 3 hours, and before that, they were complete strangers. If it weren't for a coyote, they wouldn't have known each other at all. Zhao Hongyu had merely given him a worthless box of matches, and with the intention of protecting the Mohawk tribe's golden thigh, he had healed Tito's father. This had nothing to do with Zhao Hongyu's supposed brotherhood. However, Zhao Hongyu's acting was quite good, and coupled with the Indians' innocence, there were no flaws. And Tito was completely fooled by Zhao Hongyu. Watching their leader's performance, Wang Shan and the other two smirked. "It's unbelievable. Our chief is such a talented actor, and this Native American youth is so easy to fool." They were actually fooled by their chief's poor acting skills. It's hilarious. Little did Wang Shan and the other 3 geneticists know that the 21st century is an era of information explosion. People are exposed to a vast array of information, so they're certainly not easily fooled. Furthermore, with all sorts of scams constantly emerging, people have long since become less gullible. But what era is this? This is 1620, the 17th century. Note, generally referring to the period 1600 to 1699, and these people are Native Americans. They haven't been exposed to so much information. For them, the most familiar things from morning till night are hunting, sleeping, and having children with women. At most, they'd fight some enemy tribes to vent their surging testosterone. So, we can't blame them for being so easily fooled. But, anyway, the fact that the Native Americans are so easy to fool is a perfect opportunity for Zhao Hongyu and his group. "Wang Shan, build a camp stove here," Zhao Hongyu called out. He was hungry. It was still a little after 9 in the morning when they met Tito, and then they returned to his tribe with Tito. Treating his father had already lasted 3 hours. It would be strange if he wasn't hungry after not having eaten breakfast. Especially after Zhao Hongyu and the others had been walking through the ice and snow for so long, their energy was greatly depleted. They needed something to replenish their energy. It was late June when Zhao Hongyu arrived in this era. He had lived in the Andal tribe in the north for 3 months, and in late September he began his journey south in search of a place to stay. That journey had taken another 3 months. It was already late December, and January was almost here. It was the depths of winter, and the weather outside was bitterly cold. A gusty north wind, mixed with heavy snow, howled incessantly in the sky outside. Waist-deep snow was rare in the 21st century due to warm winters and global warming. But in 1620, it was quite common. Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and Song Hu set to work. Tito sat beside his father, gently tucking in his fur to keep out the draft. Zhao Hongai walked to the tent door, lifted a corner of the fur curtain, and peeked outside. It had been years since he'd seen such a scene. Looking out at the snow-covered ground, Zhao Hongai couldn't help but feel a mixture of admiration and nostalgia. Yes, once upon a time, when he was a child, he'd seen snow this deep. Back then, the global climate hadn't deteriorated so much, and in a single winter night, snow could often reach calf-deep. The next morning, a group of children would happily go to school, treading on the crunching snow. But since the 1990s, snow like that has disappeared. In fact, as time went on, winter snow became less and less. Worse still, one winter saw no snow at all. It wasn't until he went to college that he finally figured out that global climate change was the primary cause, and that pollution was the primary cause. Was this humanity progressing, or regressing? Slowly lowering the leather curtain, Zhao Hongai walked back, a wry smile on his face. Meanwhile, Wang Shen and his men had already dug their camp stove and placed a large, low-quality iron pot they'd been carrying on their backs. After consulting Atito, he provided firewood and the men started a fire. Cooking in the tent, Atito didn't react much, it was their custom. He was just more interested in the camp stove, as his tribe had never used it that way. 3 or 4 wooden forks were tied together with a belt made of cowhide strips. The iron pot, acquired from the white skin, was hung on top, and a fire was lit underneath. That was the method Atito and his men used. His father was already fast asleep, and Atito no longer needed to watch over him. Therefore, Atito came over and peppered Wang Shen with questions about the camp stove. People are naturally curious about the unknown. At Zhao Hongaiu's instruction, Wang Shen patiently explained it to Atito. After all, it wasn't a big deal, so even if Atito told him, it wouldn't matter. Of course, due to the language barrier, Wang Shen's words were relayed by Zhao Hongaiu. After all, Zhao Hongai was the only one endowed with a language gift. People with the same gene didn't have that benefit at first. However, if Zhao Hongai had money in the future, it wouldn't be impossible to invest heavily in training a linguistics scholar within the system. But for now, that was still very difficult. He handed Zhang Tai some low-quality stale rice and told him to prepare some porridge. The 3 of them had been eating porridge all along. Of course, if they were lucky, they'd occasionally hunt wild boar or hibernating groundhogs to satisfy their hunger. But most of the time, they just ate porridge. There was no other way. Zhao Hongai could only buy stale rice from the space-time trader. He'd really liked hamburgers or roast duck, but he'd need to be able to buy those from the trader. His level hadn't increased, and he didn't have the 10 million yuan investment funds, so he could only eat stale rice. Luckily, the space-time trader sold fueling pickled mustard greens, which made things easier for Zhao Hongaiu and the others. Fueling pickled mustard greens are salty, making them a great addition to porridge and a great appetizer. They could even be enjoyed with hunted animals, and it solved Zhao Hongaiu's salt shortage. Yes, despite the space-time trader's seemingly impressive power, Zhao Hongaiu had no investment funds, and his low level meant he couldn't buy salt. Having no salt is a daunting task. But fueling pickled mustard greens solved the problem. Porridge or rice? Zhang Tai asked Zhao Hongaiu, looking up after setting up the pot. Zhao Hongaiu thought for a moment and said, "Let's make some porridge. We'll wait until Atito's father wakes up and can eat it. He's just getting better, and something light will help him recover." Zhang Tai nodded and asked, "Chief, there doesn't seem to be any water here." Ugh. Zhang Tai's reminder reminded Zhao Hongaiu. They were no longer in the wilderness, they could find a water source for cooking and camping. So, Zhao Hongaiu turned to Atito, who was gazing intently at the camp stove, and asked, "Is there any water?" "We need it." Atito pointed to a wooden barrel nearby. "There's some in that barrel." Zhang Tai followed his advice, walked over, looked down, then walked back and shook his head at Zhao Hongaiu. "Chief, that water can't be used. It's murky, of course, water like that couldn't be consumed. God knows how many days it's been sitting there. These Indians don't even care about food safety for a single day." Zhao Hongaiu complained inwardly. Finally, after asking Atito if there were any nearby water sources and confirming the nearby Yaoxiao Creek, Zhao Hongaiu sent Song Hu to fetch a new one with a wooden bucket. A camp stove had been dug inside the tent, so there was bound to be smoke. Luckily, the Indian tent had a vent on the roof, allowing the smoke to escape easily. Besides, they usually grilled meat and other things inside the tent, so it wouldn't be a big deal. A short while later, Song Hu returned with the water. "With the water?" Everything was easy. Making porridge was actually quite simple. Just place washed old rice in a small iron pot, add water, and cook. While the porridge was cooking, Zhang Tai also took out some leftover wild boar jerky, cut it into small pieces, and added them to the pot. About half an hour later, a fragrant aroma began to waft through the tent. "Wow! What a nice smell," Atito muttered, swallowing his saliva. "Tisk, what a joke," Zhao Hongai rolled his eyes. Then he took out a small bag of fueling pickled mustard greens, which cost only 50 cents a bag at the 21st century convenience store and would be even cheaper at the wholesale market, and waved it in front of Atito's eyes. Chapter 10, Mustard, Shockling Mohawk. "Wow! It's so delicious." "What is this?" Atito asked, wiping his lips and taking a long, unsatisfied breath. He'd already finished 3 large wooden bowls of porridge and 8 bags of pickled mustard greens. Admittedly, while fueling pickled mustard greens weren't exactly a special treat, Atito had never tasted them in his entire life. And the combination of porridge and pickled mustard greens was simply delicious. "These are secret dishes of our tribe. In my tribe, we're very particular about food. We've developed so many delicious dishes. It's a shame I'm separated from the tribe now, otherwise I could have provided even more delicious food." Zhao Hongai didn't blush at all when he lied. He was completely used to it. Atito nodded. "I can imagine, you're incredibly lucky." He thought about how he'd mostly eaten meat since he was a kid, and most of it was bland. Even if they grew some potatoes and corn, a pot of them wouldn't taste very good. After all, a tribe like theirs was content just to have enough to eat. Who would be picky about taste? Otherwise, he wouldn't be so envious of plain porridge with pickled mustard greens, even considering it a delicacy. "Poor kid, I feel so bad for you." Seeing Atito's troubled expression, Zhao Hongai chuckled to himself. "But I do know how to make it, and I don't want to leave," Zhao Hongai said after a moment's thought. "My tribe should come find me soon. I plan to settle east of yours, so I need your permission." Zhao Hongai's announcement that he could make this delicious pickled mustard greens excited Atito. Especially since Zhao Hongai said he wasn't leaving, Atito couldn't wait any longer. The land eastward, near the sea, wasn't a big deal for this brother he'd made. After all, he'd saved his father, and it was only right that he repay him. "Wait until I establish a camp eastward, and then I can make this food and trade it with you." Zhao Hongai finally revealed his true colors. "Of course I'd welcome you, but we'll have to wait until my father wakes up. But it shouldn't be a big deal. His life is yours. And that's just an insignificant place. Giving it to you as a territory is nothing, Alice." They truly lack the slightest sense of ownership. If they hadn't, they wouldn't have been swindled out of that land later. Zhao Hongai sighed internally as he thought of New York's history. Historically, it was the Dutch who first landed in the New York area and acquired Manhattan Island from the Indians in exchange for a mere pile of fake jewelry. The value of that jewel was a mere 24 French livres. Zhao Hongai, however, had forgotten the exact year the Dutch landed in the New York area. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't recall the event. It was a shame, since he wasn't a history student. The fact that he could imagine the Dutch using fake jewelry to swindle Manhattan Island was already impressive. What Zhao Hongai didn't know was that his arrival had already initiated some small changes. The Dutch, who were supposed to arrive in 1609, were nowhere to be seen. Even if the Dutch showed up, it wouldn't matter, because after swindling Manhattan Island, the settlement they established never exceeded 100 people. Furthermore, between 1609 and 1620, the inhabitants of this Dutch settlement disappeared. As for the reason, later scholars have yet to pinpoint the root cause. However, the most likely possibility is that they were wiped out by the Indians. There are many good places around our tribe. Why choose the East? Atito thought the eastern region wasn't very good, with few wild animals and no hunting opportunities. His brother's choice there was a big loss. And he couldn't go against his conscience and force his brother to choose that side. After listening to Atito's advice and describing the conditions along the eastern coast, Zhao Hongai expressed his gratitude. What a simple man. Actually, if my tribe came looking for me, they would definitely follow the coastline. So I had to settle somewhere by the sea, so that my people could find me more easily. Of course, Zhao Hongai wouldn't reveal the real reason, as he was still thinking about developing the great voyages of discovery. So, why not settle near the sea? Besides, developing his business by the sea, away from the Moxie, would be more convenient for him. Otherwise, he'd have to avoid being exposed. He still wanted to trade with the Moxie tribe, so he had to stay as far away as possible. After all, the Moxie tribe numbered over 10,000 people, and the surrounding smaller tribes wouldn't easily trespass on their territory and provoke them. With the Moxie protecting them, Zhao Hongyu could develop with peace of mind. Oh, so that's why, after hearing Zhao Hongyu's explanation, Atito stopped trying to persuade him. Indeed, being there made it easier for his tribe to find him, and he couldn't let his good intentions lead to bad consequences. Once my tribe finds me, I'll have them bring in iron axes, knives, and pots. Our tribe can easily make these things ourselves, Zhao Hongyu hinted to Atito, gauging his reaction. Atito showed interest. He gently put down the low-quality wooden bowl in his hand and looked at Zhao Hongyu seriously. Brother, is what you said true? Your tribe can make iron axes and knives. Atito's interest was well-founded. Given the Indians' low productivity, they couldn't mine or forge iron products. Therefore, they had always relied on trading with the whites for iron products. However, the whites were greedy, and the trade was unfair. Since the Indians couldn't forge these things, they had to be exploited by the whites. If what Zhao Hongyu said was true, then wouldn't it be an opportunity for them to escape the exploitation of the whites? The Indians might be simple, but they were not stupid. Zhao Hongyu nodded seriously and picked up the wooden bowl in front of him to play with it. In our tribe, wooden bowls are much better than this one. Zhao Hongyu deliberately showed a proud look. Wang Shan, bring out our bowl, okay. Wang Shan pulled a sleek, brown wooden bowl from his green military satchel and handed it over. These bowls were commonplace on the streets for just 5 yuan in the 21st century, but even this commonplace item deeply astounded Atito. He carefully took the bowl Wang Shan handed him, his eyes widening as he examined it. It was incredibly smooth, incredibly beautiful, and far superior to the wooden bowls we use. His own wooden bowls, hollowed out from a single piece of wood, were a world apart. As a brother, I've decided to give you a set. Zhao Hongyu saw Atito's stunned expression and felt immensely satisfied. With a wave of his hand, he gifted Atito with the set. In fact, the wooden items he presented to Atito were originally part of what Zhao Hongyu and his 3 companions had used during their journey. They included 5 wooden bowls, 4 large wooden plates, 3 medium plates, 3 small plates, 4 wooden teacups, and a large bowl for soup. This is truly precious, to Atito. The set of items Zhao Hongyu gifted him was no less precious than gifting someone a villa complete with mahogany furniture in the 21st century. We're brothers, no need to be polite. When my people find me, I promise to trade this kind of goods with you, and the price will be fairer than with the whites, Zhao Hongyu promised, patting his chest. Atito was naturally willing to trade with Zhao Hongyu. After all, Zhao Hongyu was also an Indian, and generally more trustworthy and sociable than the whites. Over here, an iron axe can be exchanged for 50 beaver pelts or 30 sable, bear, or other skins from other tribes. The price is very fair, Zhao Hongyu stated a price, tentatively gauging Atito's reaction. In fact, he had deliberately given a high price, simply to leave room for negotiation. After all, at this age, he would be sorry if he didn't make a huge profit in trade. Now wasn't the time to focus on small profits and quick turnover. He still had a lot of investments but didn't have the money. If he didn't invest more to make money and buy genetic upgrades, his safety wouldn't be guaranteed. So, he needed to be a bit ruthless at this point. In fact, in the Andal tribe, an iron axe would trade for 30 beaver pelts, or 15 mink pelts. What, 50 beaver pelts, or 30 mink pelts? Atito exclaimed in shock. Such a big reaction. Did I ask too high? Zhao Hongyu felt a little uneasy, worried that the good relationship he had established would be ruined. Just as he was about to offer his services, Atito looked at him with a look of deep sorrow and said, "Do you know? Those white people who call themselves Ziggle countrymen in the south are trading 80 beaver pelts for a single axe. Phew." Zhao Hongyu finally breathed a sigh of relief. These damn white people are so evil. Zhao Hongyu feigned extreme anger and cursed. Atito and Zhao Hongyu exchanged words, making Wang Shen and the other 3 genetic people chuckle inwardly. Your tribe is truly fair. As long as you maintain a supply, I can guarantee a smooth trade. Atito didn't even need his father to make the final decision. The difference between 80 hides for an axe and 50 hides for an axe was something even a fool could calculate. Atito picked up Zhao Hongyu's axe, dagger, and machete and examined them carefully. He found them to be far superior to those of the white people, and their edges were much sharper. Little did he know that even the inferior pig iron of the 21st century was still far superior to the iron of contemporary Europe. Of course, he couldn't even compare to the iron of the Ming Dynasty or Japan. Chapter 11 Zhao Hongayu's Proposal. Zhao Hongayu's description of the future filled Atido with longing. Atido could foresee that if, as Zhao Hongayu had described, his people found him and were able to successfully conduct trade, it would be a huge boon to the Moxigan tribe. Firstly, they would no longer be oppressed by the white people. Secondly, with the sharp iron axe and the sight, the Moxigan tribe's combat power would be greatly enhanced. However, this all depended on one prerequisite: Zhao Hongayu's people could find him. If they couldn't, then all this would be a pipe dream. "Brother, are you sure your people can find you?" Atido expressed some concern. Zhao Hongayu smiled and replied, "Don't worry. After your father wakes up, I'll go check out the east. Perhaps my people have already landed there, and our trade will definitely resume normally." Zhao Hongayu said this, but in his heart, he was thinking, "The reason I'm trying to deceive you is to avoid exposing my space-time trader. After all, having so many things appear around me all at once would surely arouse unnecessary suspicion. But as long as I can establish a base on the eastern coast, everything will be easy." Of course, Zhao Hongayu wouldn't tell Atido about this. It was his secret. Seeing Zhao Hongayu's confidence, Atido stopped questioning. He picked up the wooden bowl Zhao Hongayu had given him and handed it to Wang Shan. "Give me another bowl of porridge, and 2 more packets of pickled mustard greens." Honestly, Atido had only eaten half his fill. This was truly delicious. Looking at Atido slurping his food beside him, a trade plan slowly formed in Zhao Hongayu's mind. In the 21st century, Zhao Hongayu, a man known for his fake points, would have been a senior executive at a Fortune 500 company. Though a manager, he possessed a wealth of experience. He was no stranger to the world of business. Moreover, living in the era of the information age, he was exposed to a wide range of business information and models. He considered the Moxigan tribe's population of over 13,000 to be a vast market. If he could cultivate a habit among them, he would have complete control over their lives, which would bring him enormous profits. So, Zhao Hongayu's current task was to sell his iron pots, rice, and pickled mustard greens. At the very least, he had to get them into the habit of eating porridge in the morning, so that his pickled mustard greens would have a good market. Atido, you know what? A few bowls of porridge with pickled mustard greens every morning can really energize you all day long. At that moment, Zhao Hongayu was like a big bad wolf wagging its tail, while Atido was a simple, innocent little white rabbit. Of course, depending on your taste, you can add some meat strips to the mix. "I'm sure your people will love this delicacy." Atido swallowed his food and nodded hurriedly. "You're right. Everyone will love this kind of food. I don't think anyone would refuse such a delicacy. I can't live without it anymore." He completely agreed with what Zhao Hongayu said. "As you know, before I met you, our tribe only eats meat, or corn and potatoes. It's the same old food. I'm tired of it," Atido said of the food he ate every day, with deep disgust. Zhao Hongayu understood Atido's reaction. After all, if he ate the same things year-round, he'd get tired of them. Besides, there weren't many seasonings these days. Meat couldn't be cooked in any other way except roasting. It was incredibly monotonous. And corn and potatoes, too, could only be cooked one way, boiling. This wasn't just the way the Native Americans did it. Even in seemingly developed Europe, it was the same. No matter what food, they just threw it into the pot and boiled it. In the end, the food looked like pig food. It would have been nice to have MSG or oil. These were essential for daily life, and with oil, he could have taught them to cook. Unfortunately, there was no MSG or oil available for purchase on Zhao Hongayu's space-time trading device. So, there was nothing he could do about it, and he could only sigh inwardly. Zhao Hongayu knew that if he could get the Moxigan tribe to cook with oil and MSG every day, his profits would be endless. Alice, forget oil and MSG, he couldn't even buy salt right now. After looking around, Zhao Hongayu asked, "What kind of cooking utensils do you usually use to prepare your food?" "Cooking utensils?" Atido was stunned, unsure what that meant. "Oh, it's what you use to cook your food." Seeing Atido's stunned expression, Zhao Hongayu immediately understood. Atido put down his wooden bowl and walked to the other side of the tent, rummaging through a pile of leather. He then returned with something resembling a small cooking pot. "Look, We use this to cook our food, and those unscrupulous white people are actually asking me for 5 bear skins for this piece of junk. Yeah, how unscrupulous. Zhao Hongyu nodded seriously after hearing Atito's words. He took the pot, examined it, and then set it on the ground. I thought it was something valuable, but it's just a cheap iron pot, the same size as a modern milk boiling pot, and they're asking me for 5 bear skins. These European idiots are truly unscrupulous. Even if I had to exchange it, I should have done it myself, Zhao Hongyu muttered to himself. Although he didn't know what the bear skin would sell for on the space-time trader, 5 bear skins were definitely worth more than a cheap iron pot. Why hadn't I come across such a profitable sale? But now that I'm here, I'll probably monopolize the white people's business from now on. Zhao Hongyu was highly conscious and determined to help his Indian brothers escape the clutches of the European scoundrels, putting an end to their suffering. Look at my pot, Zhao Hongyu asked Atito, pointing to the iron pot he used to cook porridge. Atito replied with envy, this pot is great, especially the size. It's also much thicker than the white people's pots, so it won't break as easily. Yes, Zhao Hongyu's iron pot was the kind of black iron cooking pot you often see in rural areas. It was much smaller than the ones used in canteens, but it was more than enough to cook for 6 people at once, and it was also thick and resistant to cracking. This was its most valuable feature. After all, it was a 21st century product, and even the inferior ironwork was far superior to that of contemporary Europe. The pots the white people traded with the Indians were not only thin but also small, unable to cook much food at once, which annoyed many Indians. Consequently, every family had to buy several pots. This was a real bargain for the Europeans, who profited immensely from the fur trade. But the Indians lacked the technology to smelt iron, so they were completely exploited by the Europeans. Zhao Hongyu gathered a wealth of intelligence from his casual conversation with Atito, and also gained a good grasp of the local prices. According to Atito, fewer than 100 warriors in his tribe possessed iron weapons. The rest were still using wooden or stone weapons. This was excellent news for Zhao Hongyu. Don't worry, I'll have more than enough iron weapons for you. And since we're brothers, I'll give you a discount on top of the 50 beaver pelts, so I'll just give you 30. Zhao Hongyu feigned generosity in his assurances to Atito. In reality, his heart was bleeding. However, to gain the protection, support, and friendship of the Mohegan tribe, sometimes appropriate gestures were necessary. Anyway, the price of 30 beaver pelts was a whopping profit for Zhao Hongyu. After all, 30 beaver pelts sold on the trading platform would fetch over 8,000 yuan. But how much would a low-quality cast iron axe cost? A mere 30 or 40 yuan. If that wasn't a huge profit, then what else could be considered a huge profit? Atito's excitement intensified. In his eyes, Zhao Hongyu was a god incarnate. Of course, I hope you can help me with my affairs on the eastern coast when your father wakes up, Zhao Hongyu said, somewhat embarrassedly, making a small request. Compared to the Dutch who bought Manhattan Island for 24 livres, I'm already a saint. Although aware that his methods were somewhat unethical, Zhao Hongyu kept comforting himself in his heart. Don't worry, my father will definitely agree. After all, this will benefit us immensely, and we're only offering you such a small reward. It's truly shameful. Atito lowered his head in shame. He felt that Zhao Hongyu had suffered a great loss, while the Mohawk tribe had gained a huge advantage. How naive! Did they have no concept of land? Zhao Hongyu sighed inwardly. No wonder such a large Indian population would end up like this after hundreds of years. Atito also overlooked one thing, Zhao Hongyu's current assurances were merely verbal. The deal hadn't been finalized. Who knew when his tribesmen would find him? Chapter 12 Huge Profits. My son and the wizard both told me that it was you, a distant guest, who saved me. I'm truly grateful. The day passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was the next morning. Thanks to the penicillin, Atito's father finally woke up, and he looked much better than he had the day before. Zhao Hongyu was overjoyed to see Atito's father's improvement. I can't stand by and watch someone die. My father taught me from a young age that when I'm able, I must help others, Zhao Hongyu replied humbly. Your father is great, Atito's father, Samra, said sincerely, looking at Zhao Hongyu. My son said you need that piece of land by the sea in the east. The old patriarch didn't waste time. He directly asked the question his son had asked him. Zhao Hongyu nodded. Yes, if you allow me, I would like to obtain the right to use and control that land, he replied calmly, without any evasion. Samura closed his eyes, thought for a moment, and then said, "Yes, we Indians should be friendly to one another. I understand you need a piece of land for your tribe to recuperate. But can you truly guarantee that your people can find you?" He had been determined to make this happen the moment his son mentioned the trade. After all, Zhao Hongayu's offer was very fair, much more so than the unscrupulous whites. Besides, if trade was possible, why would they have to trade with the whites? An Indian tribe could easily replace the whites, I can guarantee that. They'll be able to find me by this afternoon at the latest, Zhao Hongayu said with a serious expression, as if he meant it. Seeing his earnestness, Samura had no choice but to believe him. "As long as they find me, I can have them tell my father to bring us the goods we want to trade," Zhao Hongayu said with conviction. "That way, we won't have to worry about the whites anymore." His words drew a steady nod from the tribal elders who had visited Samura that morning. Indeed, if this were truly accomplished, the whites would, of course, no longer have to worry about them. After all, they were trading axes and pots. Since the Indian brothers could make them, and their quality was far superior to the whites, and they were also cheaper, they would naturally choose them. Meanwhile, the Mohawk elders held a deep hatred for the unscrupulous whites. Then, in front of all the tribal elders, Samura agreed to transfer all the land along the eastern coast near New York to Zhao Hongayu. Thus, the area that would one day become America's most prosperous metropolis was firmly in Zhao Hongayu's possession. The future New York was now simply known as Bapan in Indian language. Samura and Zhao Hongayu agreed to use a small river as the boundary between the Mohawk and Zhao Hongayu tribes. In other words, all the land to the east would be Zhao Hongayu's. Of course, that's the theory, and it's also true in Indian law. But the question is, Zhao Hongayu and his team only have 4 people. Can they protect such a large area of land? After all, the land in the east is quite large. Zhao Hongayu extended his right index finger and touched it with Samura's, and the agreement was sealed. Oh, as their index fingers touched, the tribal elders exclaimed in delight. After a while, their attention shifted to the iron knife and pot Zhao Hongayu had produced. Wang Shen and his team set up their pots on the camp stove they had dug long ago and began to cook porridge. After Zhao Hongayu explained the situation and reminded everyone to remember the price for future transactions, all the elders nodded in satisfaction. Honestly, Zhao Hongayu's price for the iron products was truly reasonable compared to the white people. Everyone agreed with this. "Did everyone come in this morning without eating?" Zhao Hongayu asked, smiling at everyone with concern. He'd known for a while that the tribal elders had come on empty stomachs. Having asked Tito, he knew full well that the Mohegans generally didn't eat much in the morning. After all, eating that same greasy meat so early in the morning was truly unbearable. So, often, they simply forgot to eat. Zhao Hongayu gave Wang Shen a wink, and Wang Shen opened the wooden lid of the iron pot. The aroma of rice immediately filled the tent. What was that smell? It was so fragrant. A light aroma, with a hint of meat, but not too strong. What was that white stuff? I'd never seen it before. After Wang Shen opened the lid and took a closer look at the rice porridge inside, the elders began to chatter among themselves. However, unlike them, Atito and his father swallowed hard, with Atito's father, in particular, looking rather embarrassed. In the middle of the night, Atito's father woke up. Thanks to penicillin, Atito's father, Samura, recovered quickly. While not fully recovered, the inflammation was slowly subsiding. Upon waking, he felt particularly hungry, having not eaten properly in the past few days. When Samura woke, Zhao Hongayu and Atito both noticed. They rose and gathered around to ask about his condition. Hearing that he was a little hungry, Zhao Hongayu had Wang Shen heat up the meat porridge and mix it with some pickled mustard greens for him to eat. After all, he had only just recovered, so he couldn't indulge in excessive eating. It was this bowl of porridge that completely piqued Samura's appetite, and he couldn't forget it. A bowl of meat porridge with pickled mustard greens was not enough for Samura. Unfortunately, no matter how much he pleaded, Zhao Hongayu wouldn't let him eat. He said he had just recovered from his illness, his spleen and stomach hadn't recovered yet, and he shouldn't overeat. He was clearly hungry, so why wasn't he allowed to eat? But since his life was saved by the young man, he still followed Zhao Hongayu's advice. Besides, his son, Atito, kept urging him to be obedient. And so, Samura had endured it until now. He had never tasted such fragrant meat porridge before. Especially with the addition of pickled mustard greens, The taste was unforgettable. Gurgle, as Samurai thought about it, his stomach rumbled. Atito opened his mouth slightly and glanced at his father. What are you looking at? Rumbling stomachs are normal, aren't they? Don't you make noises when you're hungry? Samurai rolled his eyes and said to his son, Atito. So don't look at me like that. It really annoys me. Atito, feeling frustrated, looked away. Meanwhile, Wang Shan had already taken out wooden bowls and filled them with meat porridge topped with pickled mustard greens. Zhang Tai and Song Hu then handed them to the Indian elders gathered around him. For the next 2 hours, Wang Shan cooked porridge non-stop. Zhao Honggai continued to teach the elders how to cook rice. For 2 hours, the elders devoured bowl after bowl. Even when their bellies felt full, they kept eating. They had never known there was such a delicious breakfast in the world. This thought involuntarily crossed everyone's mind. Little did they know that porridge tasted especially good in the morning. This was why Zhao Honggai had chosen this time of day to give the tribal elders a taste. As expected, after enjoying the meat porridge with pickled mustard greens that Zhao Honggai had specially ordered, everyone expressed great interest in the food. Of course, the iron pot used for cooking the porridge was also quite good. It was far superior to the pots used by the white-skinned people. After breakfast, the elders gathered around Zhao Honggai, asking him questions. Zhao Honggai responded and explained his experience, saying he could teach them how to make meat porridge and sell pickled mustard greens. He even gave each of the elders a black iron pot. He also explained that this rice could be used not only for porridge but also for rice, and that it was delicious when paired with pickled mustard greens. To convince them, Zhao Honggai had Wang Shan simmer a pot of rice and serve it with pickled mustard greens for everyone to try. Although everyone had eaten a lot of porridge that morning and wasn't hungry at all, they all tried a little. As Zhao Honggai had predicted, this method transformed the rice and proved quite good. Hearing that Zhao Honggai still had some pickled mustard greens in stock, the elders immediately offered their own prices to buy them. 100 bags of fueling pickled mustard greens, each worth 0.5 yuan, were worth only 50 yuan. Yet, in this place, they could be exchanged for 3 mink pelts worth over 1,000 yuan. Huge profits, truly exorbitant. Zhao Honggai traded his stash of mustard tubers for 60 sable pelts and 40 bear skins right inside the tent. Of course, this wasn't entirely due to the mustard tubers, the iron pot also contributed. A market of over 10,000 people, as long as they could supply their own food and daily necessities, they'd be making a killing. With all that money, they could buy a ship and embark on a maritime trade. Now that it was 1620, it would be a shame not to venture out and explore the seas. Zhao Honggai lowered his head, his eyes flickering for a moment before he waved to Wang Shan. I've decided to open a cooking class in this tribe. You teach them how to make porridge and rice. Once they get used to it, we'll have no problem selling our pots, rice, and mustard tubers, Zhao Honggai quickly thought. To sell his pots, rice, and mustard tubers, he decided to have Wang Shan teach them how to make porridge and steamed rice using these pots. Chapter 13 Trade Summary. Wang Shan's cooking class went very smoothly. The Mohawk housewives were fascinated by this new food, and a constant stream of people came to learn. Furthermore, with the popularity of the iron pot, Zhao Honggai's rice and pickled mustard greens sold like hotcakes, and he earned numerous furs every day. Although it was winter and the Indians weren't out hunting, every family had a large stockpile of furs. They used these furs for tent wrapping, quilts, and mattresses, but nothing else. Now, they could actually exchange them for iron pots and a new food to improve their diet, so who wouldn't be happy? After all, the furs were useless, they might as well trade them for axes, knives, or pickled mustard greens, so, the Indians benefited. And Zhao Honggai made a killing, beaming with joy. Zhao Honggai had Zhang Tai and Song Hu pretend to go for a stroll along the eastern coast. Upon their return, Zhao Honggai, in front of a Tito, announced that the tribe had found them. Zhao Honggai had already sent the tribesmen back to convey the trade agreement he had reached with the Mohicans. Within 3 days, news arrived from Zhao Honggai's tribe, claiming they had approved the deal and had sent shipments of ironware, rice, preserved mustard, and other goods. In reality, this was all planned in advance by Zhao Honggai, Zhang Tai, and Song Hu. They staged this act to prevent the Mohicans from noticing anything fishy. However, Zhao Honggai and his team's plan still had many flaws. The Mohicans, however, didn't think too much of it, their focus entirely on the trade. Otherwise, anyone with even a passing thought would have spotted something fishy. Zhao Hongyu had, admittedly, been quite lucky. Inside the Mohicans, Zhao Hongyu had set up a large tent, filled with fur products. You could often see Indians wearing 1970s-style military coats, bringing their own furs to Zhao Hongyu to trade. These Indians wore green coats, khaki-colored leather work boots, and carried iron machetes slung at their waists. These garments, now relegated to protective gear in the 21st century, were incredibly popular with the Mohawk men. With them, they were no longer afraid of the cold. They were truly warm. Zhao Hongyu explained that he simply ran a small shop within the Mohawk tribe. Beaver, mink, bear, wolf, bison, badger, and even marmot skins were traded by the Mohawks, giving Zhao Hongyu a glimpse into their purchasing power and enthusiasm. Of course, the men mostly traded for axes and knives. While they enjoyed a morning meal of white porridge or meat porridge with pickled mustard greens, food was not as appealing to them as weapons. On the other hand, the housewives were clearly more interested in rice, pots, cotton-padded jackets, and boots than the men. Therefore, Zhao Hongyu's products were a huge hit among both men and women in the Moxigan tribe. Oh, it would be great if we could develop some new products. At least some cooking oil would be good. That way, I could teach them how to cook. They have plenty of meat, and selling cooking oil is the most profitable, Zhao Hongyu thought to himself. Wang Shan's cooking class was short-lived, primarily because it focused on teaching a single dish, porridge. Porridge is so easy to make, so the women in the Moxigan tribe quickly mastered the technique. In about a week, all the women in the tribe, regardless of age, had learned this new cooking method. Eventually, Wang Shan's cooking class was temporarily closed. The reason for this closure was that if Zhao Hongyu developed new products in the future, the class would continue to teach them. After all, this would accelerate the product's distribution and ensure rapid adoption. Nowadays, every family in the Moxigan tribe would feel listless if they didn't have a morning sip of warm meat porridge or plain porridge, followed by some crunchy pickled mustard greens. Pickled mustard greens are very salty, and this is the key reason why the Moxigan people are so drawn to them. It's not that there's no salt in the Moxigan tribe, but the salt tastes astringent and bitter, and it simply can't compare to the saltiness of pickled mustard greens. Therefore, for the people of the Moxigan tribe, eating pickled mustard greens is essentially like eating salt. Zhao Hongyu himself hadn't expected such a situation to occur. But overall, it was a good thing for him. As long as he could make money, he didn't care about anything else. Among Zhao Hongyu's goods, iron pots were almost sold out. After all, the population of the Moxigan tribe was only a little over 13,000, so selling only 2,000 or 3,000 iron pots would mean they wouldn't sell any more. The same situation held true for wooden tableware, iron axes, and daggers. After all, the population was limited. However, sales of zake, pickled mustard tubers, remained remarkably steady, with buyers arriving daily. Zhao Hongyu had seen some Mohicans devour 20 or 30 small bags of fueling zake in a single day, causing him to worry about them choking. Note, is a northeastern dialect word meaning, implying excessive food intake. Time flew by, and another month had passed. It was already the end of January, a cold winter. Unknowingly, Zhao Hongyu had already been in this era for over 6 months, completely accustomed to a life without computers and entertainment. Now, his wounds had slowly healed, and aside from a dozen unsightly scars, he had no lasting effects. The scar on his face, however, added a fierceness to his otherwise delicate features. During his month in the Mohawk tribe, Zhao Hongyu's fair dealings and warm hospitality earned him the goodwill of the entire tribe. Furthermore, he had treated the tribal leader, Samra, and became a brother with the leader's son, Utito. Furthermore, the old shaman Paro had learned some healing skills from him and became an agent for penicillin and saline solution. Once these Mohawk leaders had become Zhao Hongyu's friends, the rest of the Mohawk tribe followed suit. Even the rebellious Mohawk warriors, led by Black Bear, showed respect for Zhao Hongyu. The reason was simple: Zhao Hongyu had used promicin to treat Black Bear's daughter, who had suffered a calf ulcer, saving her life. As a result, Zhao Hongyu became a celebrity throughout the Mohawk tribe. With the Mohawk tribe's support, Zhao Hongyu's development on the eastern coast was virtually guaranteed. As night fell, heavy snow began to fall. The howling north wind swept through the tents, and everyone retreated to their tents to rest. Zhao Hongyu, along with Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and Song Hu, was in his own tent, reviewing his accounts. This month, we sold a total of 2,813 iron pots, 5,378 iron axes, 3,642 daggers, 2,890 machetes, 624 sets of wooden cutlery, 4,089 boxes of matches, 28 bottles of penicillin and saline solution, 1,255 sets of workwear cotton padded jackets and trousers, 2,897 green military coats, 765 pairs of leather workwear cotton padded boots, 418 bottles of Red Star Ergo Tao, 300,000 kilograms of rice, and pickled mustard greens. Wang Shan gave a convincing summary of their sales. Zhao Hongaiyu sighed as he listened. Actually, Zhao Hongaiyu's capital was modest. When he left the Andal tribe in the north, he had only 31,400 yuan in his virtual account. Meanwhile, he, Wang Shan, and the other three bought all their food along the way with funds from his virtual account. Furthermore, they had no way to trade with other Indian tribes, so their funds dwindled even further. During the 2 months they were on the road, Zhao Hongaiyu's account was reduced to just over 7,000 yuan. But even this 7,000 yuan was more than enough for Zhao Hongaiyu. It was with this remaining 7,000 yuan that Zhao Hongaiyu made a huge profit in that month. One iron axe could be traded for 30 beaver pelts or 15 mink pelts, 45 yuan per pelt on the time-space trader. One iron pot could be traded for 60 beaver pelts or 30 mink pelts, 88 yuan per pelt on the time-space trader. One iron dagger could be traded for 5 beaver pelts or 2 mink pelts, 28 yuan per pelt on the time-space trader. One iron machete could be traded for 80 beaver pelts or 40 mink pelts. The time-space trader costs 30 yuan each. One set of wooden cutlery can be exchanged for 200 beaver pelts or 100 mink pelts. The time-space trader costs 388 yuan per set. Wang Shan rambled on, presenting Zhao Hongaiyu with a report that left him dizzy. Don't bother explaining these things, I know the numbers. Zhao Hongaiyu waved his hand. Just give me a total. Zhao Hongaiyu knew that going into too much detail would be cumbersome. A single total was all he needed for reconciliation. As for the possibility of discrepancies, that was perfectly normal. After all, sometimes there were many people bartering, and it was inevitable that some furs might be taken away or a few more machetes or axes might be given. Upon hearing this, Wang Shan immediately skipped over the details and said, so far, we've collected a total of 124,538 beaver pelts, 48,455 mink pelts, 300 bear pelts, 276,096 bison pelts, and not counting wolf, badger, and marmot pelts. They're all stored in the space-time trader's warehouse. After all, wolf, badger, and marmot pelts don't fetch a good price. Why is it so few? He knew about wolf pelts and other items, so he had no objection to storing them and had agreed to it. However, Zhao Hongaiyu was a little surprised by the number of beaver pelts. Based on the volume of goods he'd sold, he should have been able to exchange for at least 20 or 30 times that amount if for Wang Shan gave Zhao Hongaiyu a wry smile and said, Captain, logically, our fur sales should have increased several times over, but you forgot you had a month-long promotion. Oh. Wang Shan's words really reminded Zhao Hongaiyu. Chapter 14, Increased Manpower. Wang Shan reminded him, and Zhao Hongaiyu remembered. That's right, in his moment of triumph, he'd orchestrated a preferential trade. Discounts, massive sales, or even ditching buildings and digging holes in the ground for a sale, all of that had the Mohawk housewives in stitches, driving them to ecstasy. That's how the scene got so heated. These little tricks are commonplace in the 21st century, but in 1620, they were unprecedented. The Indian women had never seen anything like this before. They cared only about the bargains, the deals, and the incredibly tempting prices. This significantly reduced the number of furs Zhao Hongaiyu could trade. However, it also brought him a benefit. His reputation within the Mohawk tribe soared. Men, women, and children alike were incredibly fond of him. Indian thinking is simple: if you're fair and just, you'll earn my trust. And Zhao Hongaiyu wasn't just fair and just, he even bleeded blood in his trade. With an awkward smile, Zhao Hongaiyu said to Wang Shan and the other two, I completely forgot about this. I wouldn't have remembered it if you hadn't reminded me. He felt truly embarrassed. Chief, you should check the virtual account. It's much more reliable than listening to my summary report, Wang Shan said, looking at his young leader with a mixture of laughter and tears. Looking at Zhao Hongaiyu, Zhang Tai and Song Hu also chuckled. They didn't look down on Zhao Hongyu, they simply thought the young leader was endearing. For the three of them, having a leader like him wasn't bad. At least it wouldn't be so boring. Zhao Hongyu nodded and opened his virtual account. Over 7.5 million yuan in cash came into view. Oh my god, this month's income is really huge. Zhao Hongyu's heart pounded when he saw the amount. This was just a transaction with one tribe, the Moxigan tribe, and over 7.5 million yuan in 1 month. If he could expand this trade, exceeding 10 million yuan a month wouldn't be a problem. However, Zhao Hongyu also knew that blindly expanding trade right now was unrealistic. After all, he wasn't familiar with the surrounding tribes, and even with the protection of the Mohawk tribe, it was inevitable that the European elders would find out. This would cause great trouble. Zhao Hongyu didn't want to be exposed too early, at least for now. He couldn't handle those Europeans, over 7.5 million. I need to think carefully about how to use this money. Wang Shan, we have over 7.5 million yuan in cash on hand. What do you think I should do with it? As the saying goes, one person's shortcomings are better than the others. Zhao Hongyu began to discuss with Wang Shan and the others. Hearing this, Wang Shan glanced at Zhang Tai, Song Hu, and the others, then thought for a moment before replying, "Chief, please tell me your plan first." Wang Shan and the others didn't have any ideas, but if they were to offer them, there had to be a prerequisite. After all, Zhao Hongyu was their leader, and they were not allowed to make any inroads into the development plans. He decided. Me? Wang Shan's question didn't displease Zhao Hongyu. He knew they were acting on their own will at night, so they couldn't rashly impose a direction. And this general direction had to be given to them themselves. I'm thinking of buying some more genetically modified individuals. After all, our forces are too weak right now. And we need a few new faces, otherwise my earlier lie about having a tribe would be exposed. Considering their current manpower shortage, Zhao Hongyu felt it was better to buy in more personnel. After all, he only had Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and Song Hu by his side, a truly insufficient number of men. Chief, this is the right decision, Wang Shan nodded. Without enough manpower, it will be very difficult for us to carry out our work in the future, and your safety will also be a major concern. Wang Shan had been deeply concerned about this. As soon as Wang Shan finished speaking, Song Hu next to him interrupted, saying, I support you, Wang Shan. Chief, you have too few subordinates. There are only 3 of us now. If you were to encounter any danger, I'm worried we wouldn't be able to protect you, Zhang Tai echoed. In this age of cold weapons, numbers are an advantage. Until you develop powerful firearms, we can only rely on numbers. Seeing that all 3 of them supported his decision, Zhao Hongyu frowned. I understand what you're saying, but I'm a little confused. If all the money I earn goes into population development, then should I still develop new products? Zhao Hongyu didn't hide anything and shared a dilemma with the 3 of them. Hearing Zhao Hongyu's words, Wang Shan smiled and said, Chief, your thinking is a bit misguided. After a moment's reflection, Wang Shan understood the dilemma his leader was currently struggling with. Oh, tell me, what's wrong with me? Zhao Hongyu asked, raising his eyebrows. Wang Shan said, Chief, first we have to consider the purchasing power of the Mohican tribe. Then, even if we have a new product, can they afford it? Zhao Hongyu fell silent after Wang Shan's words. He pondered this seriously. The Mohican tribe had a total population of 13,000, made up of approximately 3,000 families. This meant that his product, considered per family unit, was already quite substantial. Furthermore, he had already plundered nearly all of the Mohican furs over the past month. This represented decades of accumulated stock, otherwise, there wouldn't be so much. Some Mohicans even dismantled their tents and brought the furs they'd been wrapping them into Zhao Hongyu in exchange for goods. It was conceivable that sales wouldn't be as explosive in the coming days. Instead, they would gradually level off, becoming a steady trickle. Wang Shan probably took these considerations into account when he said that. You can't say Wang Shan's considerations were incorrect, because they would indeed face such a problem in the future. Furthermore, such a situation had already begun to emerge. Even if he developed a new product, it wouldn't necessarily sell well. The Indians in the Mohawk tribe had almost no spare furs left. Even if Zhao Hongyu wanted to expand trade and use the Mohawk tribe as a middleman, he would have to consider some complications and feasibility. After all, while the Mohawk tribe was the largest tribe in the vicinity, with no larger tribes nearby, These smaller tribes still had some grievances with the Mohawk tribe. Therefore, if trade didn't go through, it could lead to sudden conflict, which would be counterproductive. After considering ththese issues, Zhao Hongyu nodded seriously and said, "Wang Shan, you're right. It seems my considerations weren't thorough enough. Developing new products isn't necessary given our current situation." Seeing that his leader had understood this, Wang Shan's smile widened. "Chief, I'm glad you've thought it through," Wang Shan said sincerely. "We must now recruit more personnel. Only in this way can we ensure both human resources and your own safety." Now that all the issues had been resolved, Zhao Hongyu had also come to a conclusion. Now all he had to do was quickly purchase genetically modified individuals and expand his staff. He opened the option to purchase genetically modified individuals within the space-time trader and, using a preset template, purchased 12 individuals at a price of 442,200 yuan each. This cost Zhao Hongyu 5,306,400 yuan in cash, but even then, he still had over 220,000 yuan left. He had a plan for this remaining money. He planned to save some of it. Once he had 3 million yuan, he would invest in a Shanshui to rapidly produce flintlock rifles and paper medicine. Once he had flintlock rifles, he could then sell matchlock rifles in large quantities to the warriors of the Mohawk tribe. Zhao Hongyu had even figured out that even if they didn't have furs to trade, he could still buy them on credit. He could incite the Mohawk warriors to attack other tribes, or even simply attack the white settlements. Atito's father had always suppressed the angry young men within his tribe because of the Europeans' matchlock muskets and artillery. If he could provide them with similar weapons, the Europeans would be less formidable to the Mohawks. While the Indians lacked the technology and techniques to manufacture matchlock muskets, not even the mineral resources, Zhao Hongyu had a hack. He could easily supply them through the space-time exchange without building a factory. The price of matchlock muskets on the space-time exchange wasn't particularly high, at only 1,000 yuan each. This price was only the equivalent of 2 mink pelts or 5 beaver pelts, but it could be exchanged for hundreds of skins from the Indian tribe. Therefore, matchlock muskets were a highly profitable business, and Zhao Hongyu had long coveted them. He hadn't sold any to the Mohawks yet because he needed to master the flintlock musket. We couldn't let the Indians have guns while we didn't. At the very least, the firearms we had on hand had to be superior to those we sold to others. The tent Zhao Hongyu had erected was unlike the local Indian tents. From the outside, it looked like an oversized yurt. Inside the yurt, besides Zhao Hongyu, Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and Song Hu, there were now 12 more naked men. "You three, go choose your men." 4 men each, Zhao Hongyu gestured to them, and Wang Shan and the other 3 became leaders. Meanwhile, changes were occurring within the space-time trader. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15 How Could It Be Black-Hearted Cotton? Name, Zhao Hongyu. Age, 15. Gender, male. Civil affairs. Rank, household head. 1525. Farmer, next rank is Army Captain. Please meet the upgrade requirements. Military rank, 012. Soldier, next rank is Squad Leader. Please meet the upgrade requirements. Lifestyle. Tradable products, matches, wooden bowls and plates. Invest 10 million RMB to produce new products. Iron. Tradable products, cast iron axe, cast iron knife, cast iron pot, cast iron dagger, cast iron machete. Invest 10 million RMB to produce new products. Military production line, not enabled due to insufficient level. Invest 10 million yuan to produce new products. Biopharmaceutical products, penicillin, salt water. Invest 10 million yuan to produce new products. Food products, fueling. Pickled mustard greens, red star erguo tau, bulk rice. Invest 10 million yuan to produce new products. Apparel products, cotton military coat, pants, leather boots, green canvas messenger bag. Labor protection equipment. Invest 10 million yuan to produce new products. Counterfeit product. 17th century matchlock rifle. Invest 3 million yuan to develop a flintlock rifle. Inquiry. Since the attribute columns are too complex, should we refresh the attribute columns? Yes, no. After Zhao Hongyu purchased 12 genetic humans, he now has 15 subordinates. His civil affairs rank has also been raised to head of household. The system prompts him to refresh the attribute pages. Zhao Hongyu is naturally a bit overwhelmed by the current attribute pages. After all, such a complex attribute column is indeed a bit dazzling. Now that he had this choice, why would he refuse? Zhao Hongyu quickly confirmed the yes option in the selection box. After making his choice, his entire attribute bar trembled and then twisted. Soon, a refreshing new attribute bar appeared before his eyes. Name, Zhao Hongyu. Age, 15. Gender, male. Civil affairs rank, head of household. Genetic loyalty is always 1, 1525. Farmer, next rank is Army Captain. Please meet the promotion requirements. Military rank, 012. Soldier, next rank is Squad Leader. Please meet the promotion requirements. Copycat Technology Research Center, matches, wooden bowls and dishes, cast iron axes, cast iron kitchen knives, cast iron pots, cast iron daggers, cast iron machetes, penicillin, salt water, fueling pickled mustard tubers, red star erguo tau, bulk rice, cotton military coats and pants, leather boots, green canvas messenger bags, 17th century matchlock rifles. To add new products, please invest at least 3 million yuan. Please rename the Technology Research Center. Huh? A copycat Technology Research Center actually needs a new name. But that didn't matter to him. It's just, what should I choose? Zhao Hongyu pondered, and suddenly a sly grin curled his lips. Protection umbrella, haha, Zhao Hongyu, this guy, actually named his copycat company Protection Umbrella. Zhao Hongyu figured that since the East India Company in Europe had already opened, his own couldn't be outdone. After much thought, the only company that could rival the East India Company was the renowned Umbrella. Zhao Hongyu had no idea at this point that the Umbrella Company, founded on a whim, would eventually become a global monopoly, a company that would evoke rage in countless businessmen. Zhao Hongyu returned his gaze to his personal stats panel, noticing that the simplified version was indeed much cleaner than before. The previous stats panel had been so complex because the products were broken down into categories. While these categories allowed for a clearer understanding of the product types, they were of little use to Zhao Hongyu. It was much more comfortable to group everything together. Furthermore, after his civil affairs rank had increased, a hidden stat had been revealed using the streamlined layout. Unexpectedly, the civil affairs rank, which he had initially considered useless, now had a skill that increased the loyalty of genetic personnel to 1. This was both good news and a surprise for Zhao Hongyu. I wonder how much of a loyalty bonus my skills will grant if I upgrade to Armor Captain? Zhao Hongyu pondered this inwardly. Judging by the bonuses listed in the current stats, even at Armor Captain, Loyalty 1 would be good. However, upgrading to Armor Captain wouldn't be easy anytime soon, as I still needed 10 genetics. It had taken me a full month to purchase these 12 genetics, and I'd almost cleared out all the furs and skins in the Mohawk tribe, so I wouldn't be making this much money in a single month in the coming days. Zhao Hongyu knew this well, and he couldn't help but sigh inwardly. But, after all, he was off to a good start. Not only did he already have 15 subordinates, but he also had over 2.2 million yuan in cash in his account. Even if he encountered a small group of Indians and a conflict broke out, he could still hold his own with his current manpower. Besides, the 2 million or so he had on hand was more than enough to support him in many endeavors. While Zhao Hongyu was lost in thought, Wang Shen and his men had already selected their men. Then, Wang Shen returned to Zhao Hongyu's side. Chief, buy them some clothes. It's not good to leave them naked. From the moment they appeared, the 12 newly born Jin people had been completely naked. Wang Shen's words brought Zhao Hongyu back to his senses. He nodded and purchased 12 sets of work clothes from the space-time trader. They were green cotton military coats, cotton padded jackets and trousers underneath, and khaki leather boots. Zhao Hongyu wasn't worried about the Mohicans being disturbed by these outfits. Many people in the tribe wore these work clothes, so they didn't mind. Because Zhao Hongyu sold these outdated workwear to the Mohicans, he often had a misconception during the day, watching them walk by or chatting in the distance. He'd be dazzled, wondering if you were in a small-town market in the 1970s. Chief, these workwear items are proving very popular. They're incredibly warm and insulated, and they no longer have to suffer the cold. Wang Shen threw all the clothes Zhao Hongyu had brought over, letting the new Jin people put them on themselves. He then turned to Zhao Hongyu and said with a grin, "What's more, Some of the bravest warriors in the Mohican tribe have even changed their old habit of not going out in winter. Over a dozen of them have organized hunting trips around the area. Indeed, the Indians used to avoid winter activity, not because they didn't want to. It was simply because the cold kept them from going out. Think about it, their shoddy handmade fur clothing wasn't windproof at all. Anyone who ventured outside was struck by the freezing wind, a situation no one could endure. Therefore, when winter arrived, the Indians were forced to live in tents, build fires, and endure the harsh winter. But now, things were different. Zhao Hongayu's arrival had completely changed this dynamic. He had brought a product, clothing, incredibly warm, making winter a breeze. No matter how bitter the wind blew outside, their thick cotton-padded clothes kept them warm. This had the Indian warriors, who had been bored to death, excited. While prey was scarce in winter, it was not unavailable. Instead of sitting at home counting hares, it was better to go hunting. And if they were lucky enough to capture a hibernating grizzly bear, a single pelt could be exchanged for a wealth of goodies from Zhao Hongayu. Especially that delicious pickled mustard tuber. I can't believe my old, outdated military cotton-padded jackets, pants, and shoes have actually transformed the Mohawks' established lifestyle, Zhao Hongayu said with a mixture of amusement and tears after hearing Wang Shan's story. Wang Shan smiled and replied, "There's nothing wrong with that. With these clothes, they won't be freezing in the winter. And if they're not freezing, they won't catch colds, which means their mortality rate will be lower. You know, during these winter months, many Indian tribes die." Wang Shan was absolutely right. In 1620, winter was the harshest season in the Americas. With each winter, the weak, the elderly, and the frail Indians died in large numbers. The mortality rate was especially alarming for young children. Often, a cold or even a severe cold would kill them. There was no cure, as they had no effective medicine. In the 21st century, a cold was a minor ailment, but in this era, it was a life-threatening illness, whether in America or Europe. But now, Zhao Hongayu had arrived in the Mohegan tribe, bringing with him cotton-lined warming coats. This made winter no longer so dreadful. During the day, the Mohicans, who once preferred to stay inside their tents, now preferred to stand outside, gazing at the blue sky, breathing in the fresh air, and chatting with their neighbors. More people were visiting, the cold no longer posed a threat. "Chief, there's something I don't think you're aware of yet." Wang Shan looked at Zhao Hongayu with a flickering expression. Zhao Hongayu, observing Wang Shan's flickering expression, grew curious. "What's it? Just tell me. Stop hesitating and get straight to the point." Wang Shan gritted his teeth and said, "Chief, I suspect these military coats we're selling are made of shoddy cotton." "What? Shoddy cotton?" Zhao Hongayu's eyes widened in disbelief at Wang Shan's words. Wang Shan nodded emphatically. "That's right, Chief. Shoddy cotton." As he spoke, he took a military coat. The lining of the coat was torn, revealing a mass of black cotton. "Look." Zhao Hongayu looked closely and immediately spotted the black cotton. His cheek twitched. "Wang Shan, could it be that we're really selling shoddy cotton?" Wang Shan gave a wry smile. "Pretty much, that's it. The cotton says it all. Damn it, aren't we shoddy merchants? The time-space trader is a jerk. How could they sell us shoddy cotton products?" he muttered, somewhat puzzled. Chapter 16 Planning. No matter how much Zhao Hongayu struggled to wrap his head around it, the facts were unchangeable. His status as an illegal vendor was now a foregone conclusion. Black-hearted cotton products had become popular within the Moxigan tribe, and he'd made a killing. He couldn't just return the goods now. Wang Shan offered some advice, saying that for the sake of profit, a little dishonesty didn't matter. He could find a way to compensate them later when they were stronger. After Wang Shan's persuasion, Zhao Hongayu finally came to his senses. Illegal vendors are illegal vendors, nothing can be changed now. The fact that the space-time trader would actually sell him black-hearted cotton products shocked and surprised Zhao Hongayu. But after some reflection, he finally understood. He wondered why these labor protection products were so cheap. A military coat and a set of pants and underwear for only 150 yuan were made of black-hearted cotton. If not, they definitely wouldn't be this cheap. Now, his 12 new recruits were also wearing these shoddy cotton clothing. Zhao Hongayu considered giving them new clothes, but the thought of a set of fur products costing 3,000 yuan made him reluctant. Even though he had 2.2 million yuan in his account, it was the most important money. But after careful consideration, Zhao Hongayu decided to buy new fur coats and winter coats for his 12 men. After all, if anything happened to them because of the shoddy cotton clothing, wouldn't he lose even more money? As for the 12 sets of shoddy cotton clothing, he could just hand them over to the Mohicans. Zhao Hongyu had already perfectly morphed into the role of an illegal trader. The bulk rice was stale. The labor protection coats and cotton-padded jackets were shoddy cotton. The wooden bowls and plates were made from wood scraps and then painted with a carcinogenic paint. The Red Star or Guotao was a mixture of low-quality alcohol diluted with water, but thankfully it wasn't industrial alcohol. After a thorough inspection, Zhao Hongyu was completely defeated. The space-time trader was a complete rip-off. While the products sold there were purportedly 21st century products, their quality was truly alarming. Wang Shan, however, persuaded Zhao Hongyu not to take these issues too seriously. While these products might be considered rubbish in the 21st century, they were considered high-tech in this era and on this continent. Take, for example, the alcohol-watered or Guotao, a drink incredibly popular among the Western Mohicans. This drink, dubbed Ice and Fire by the Mohicans, became an instant hit among men upon its release. The warmth or Guotao imparted was particularly appealing, attracting men. While drinking too much could leave you with a headache, dry mouth, and general fatigue the next day, along with a complete loss of appetite, you could still have porridge in the morning. If you lacked appetite, you could opt for plain porridge instead of meat porridge, and pair it with pickled mustard greens to stimulate your appetite. This, in turn, boosted sales of rice and pickled mustard greens, something Zhao Hongyu hadn't anticipated. It seemed that the old rice and alcohol mixed with water really had no effect on him. "Chief, we now have 15 people, and with you, that's 16. What should we do next?" Now that we have our territory, Zhang Tai and Song Hu gathered around, and the new Jin people, having taken off their black cotton military coats and pants, also came over. It's the end of January now. Winter will be over in a month, and the ice and snow will melt. I think we should go to the southern coast of Manhattan Island and set up our own camp. Zhao Hongyu had already made this plan in mind. The southern coast of Manhattan was a major port in the 21st century, and if he had developed and started maritime trade, such a port would be essential. At the same time, his camp couldn't be too far from the port, as that would make transportation inconvenient. The Mohawk settlement was only a mile away from Manhattan Island, not far at all. From atop a nearby hilltop, Zhao Hongyu could see the Azure Sea. Manhattan Island, with its 3 sides bordering the river and 1 side facing the sea, had a good geographical location. In particular, the entire island is a vast plain, making it ideal for settlement. This is a fabrication by the author. Historically, Manhattan Island was definitely not a flat terrain. For those of you who are interested, please do not bother. Although Manhattan Island is surrounded by rivers on 3 sides and the sea on 1, there is still a place where you can sail a small boat to the island. This made things much simpler. The next morning, Zhao Hongyu and his men crossed a shallow Hudson River ford and landed on Manhattan land using a Mohican raft. This land all the way to the east is ours. Long Island will be a high-end villa area in the future, but right now, it seems to be a wasteland. Thinking of the urban planning of New York in the 21st century, Zhao Hongyu said to Wang Shen and the others with a smile on his face. "Chief, because of your appearance, it's uncertain whether the United States will still exist. As long as we develop it well, if you like, you can develop Long Island yourself in the future," Song Hu said in a deep voice. Song Hu's words made Zhao Hongyu's eyes light up. "Indeed, I am now in the American continent, and no outsiders have ever been to New York. The first group of Dutch had long since vanished, and the second wouldn't arrive for another 6 years. In these 6 years, I don't believe I can't develop. If I develop, not only New York, but even the entire North and South America continents will be mine." Zhao Hongyu had dreamed of global domination, and possessing the space-time trader, such ambitions weren't too big a stretch. After all, if he truly developed nuclear power, no nation in this era would be a match for him. But Zhao Hongyu also knew that life had to be lived bite by bite. He only had 15 men under his command, 16 including himself. The only weapons he could buy were muskets. With 15 men and muskets, let alone world conquest, he couldn't even conquer a nearby Indian tribe of 300. So, Zhao Hongyu quickly put aside his fantasies. He landed on Manhattan Island with 12 men. Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and Song Hu each left a subordinate behind in the Moxigan tribe. After all, the commissary was frequented daily, so a presence was essential. Manhattan Island covers an area of 5,791 square kilometers, bordered by the East River to the east, the Hudson River to the west, and the Harlem River to the north. The entire island is fertile plains, and the three rivers are home to countless animals. What a wonderful place. Zhao Hongyu has been raving about Manhattan Island ever since he set foot on it. By the 21st century, Manhattan Island alone could accommodate 1.6 million people. He didn't have the capacity to do that yet, but he could certainly plan a small town for 10,000 people. Furthermore, this plain could be put to good use and transformed into a vast expanse of fertile farmland. With an area of approximately 60 square kilometers, at least 100,000 mu, approximately 1,000 acres, could be cultivated. The output from 100,000 mu, approximately 1,000 acres, could provide food for at least 1 million people. And all this food could be exported. Europe seems to be still facing a severe food shortage these days, so he could definitely make a killing. Zhao Hongyu chuckled darkly. Yes, Europe is mountainous, with few plains. If the American continent hadn't been discovered, solving the food crisis, who knows what would have happened in Europe. At this time in Europe, the Spanish fleet had been destroyed, Britain was on the rise, the Dutch were the masters of the sea, France was still a young child, and the African slave trade was booming. This was a turbulent era. Whoever could grasp the pulse of the times would become a leader. The group arrived at the southern coast, their ears filled with the sound of waves lapping against the shore. With a breeze, Zhao Hongyu even thought he could smell the distinct salty smell of the water. It was indeed a good natural harbor. With a little development, this place could become a major port. Zhao Hongyu took a quick look, and a look of surprise crossed his face. Yes, there was a large rocky area along the southern coastline. Weathered by wind and rain, this rocky area had formed a natural flat surface, giving it the appearance of a harbor prepared by nature. This was a boon for Zhao Hongyu. If this area were utilized, it could accommodate two 21st century 10,000-ton cargo ships, not to mention the wooden ships of the 17th century. At least 20 ships could dock at once. This way, as trade developed, he wouldn't have to worry about the port for 50 years. Besides, in 50 years, he would have developed enough to purchase heavy industrial machinery. By then, rebuilding the port with concrete and cement wouldn't be impossible. Zhao Hongyu looked back at a spot not far from the natural harbor and pointed. That's where we've chosen our settlement. Tomorrow I'll talk to the Mohican leader. We'll provide food and hire the Mohicans to cut down trees, and we'll build our own wooden camp here, okay, chief? And so, Zhao Hongyu selected their settlement and formulated a series of development plans. Although he only had 15 men under his command, he had strong confidence in the future. Given time, anything was possible. The only problem is that there is no direct road to Manhattan. Chapter 17 Construction is not easy. Zhao Hongyu wanted to establish a settlement on Manhattan, and Wang Shan and the others didn't object. However, the idea ultimately fell through. The reason was simple: there was no timber on Manhattan Island, and transporting it from elsewhere would be extremely difficult. Manhattan Island is bordered by rivers on three sides and the sea on one. Transporting timber to Manhattan was difficult, and Zhao Hongyu couldn't afford high-tech transportation. Therefore, his plan was shelved. Looking at the fertile plains of Manhattan Island, Zhao Hongyu sighed inwardly. Damn, what a shame. Fortunately, while it's impossible to use timber to build a camp on Manhattan Island, it's still possible to erect a few tents resembling yurts. In short, the right thing to do was to make Manhattan his own. After all, the Mohegan tribe had already given him the island, so it would be unreasonable not to send someone to claim it. So, Zhao Hongyu ordered Song Hu and Zhang Tai to lead their men to land on Manhattan Island within 3 days and set up dozens of yurts along the southern coast. These yurts were extremely simple, constructed entirely of torn, unsaleable bison hides, framed by prefabricated wooden frames. After the yurts were built, Zhang Tai and Song Hu didn't live there with their men, but returned to the Moxigan tribe. They lacked the tools to cultivate the land, so staying on Manhattan Island was pointless. They decided to return to stay with Zhao Hongyu. Zhao Hongyu had no choice about his current situation, he couldn't change it. His only concern now was saving enough money to purchase genetically modified humans, and then investing when he had a sufficient number. He had to choose between population and investment, he couldn't develop both simultaneously. Doing so would inevitably lead to a failure in both. Zhao Hongyu wouldn't do such a foolish thing. Yes, The Moxigan tribe was his mainstay, and with their protection, his safety was secure for the time being. But Zhao Hongyu always believed that relying on the mountain was the best way to go, even if it fell. Taking shelter under the Mohawks' wings was only temporary, not a permanent solution. Due to the impediment of timber transport on Manhattan Island, Zhao Hongyu and Wang Shan, upon returning to the Mohawk, had to discuss some changes to their previous plan. No one objected to Zhao Hongyu's decision. After all, he was acting with the truth in mind. With this, Zhao Hongyu felt temporarily at ease, continuing his small business and putting aside his own fantasies. As the days passed, the furs in the Mohawk were depleted, and Zhao Hongyu's business waned. However, maintaining a dozen or so furs a day still brought in around 3,000 to 4,000 yuan. But that income was far too little for Zhao Hongyu. He explained to Tito the 12 additional men around him. These were warriors sent by his father to protect him. However, the war with the whites in his own tribe in the north continued, and he couldn't send more men. The Mohawk tribe's leaders believed this story. The goods Zhao Hongyu was carrying were shipped via the Eastern Sea. Therefore, it was only natural for Zhao Hongyu's tribe to send warriors to protect him. After all, Zhao Hongyu was the next leader of the protective umbrella tribe, so it was understandable. Fast forward to the end of February. With the arrival of spring, the ice and snow began to melt, and the earth began to revive. Small animals began to move about this pristine land. Suddenly, a marmot's burrow appeared next to Zhao Hongyu's tent. Within it, a fat, big-eared, and adorable marmot lived. Who knows when this little creature had taken up residence there? Zhao Hongyu warned everyone not to disturb it, but to let it live in peace. With Zhao Hongyu's words, the plump marmot finally settled down in peace. Every day, Zhao Hongyu would drop some pickled mustard greens at the entrance of his burrow as food for the little creature. However, due to the timid nature of the groundhog, every time it saw Zhao Hongyu, it would duck back into its burrow, waiting for safety before emerging to eat the pickled mustard greens. "Hey Tong, I'm going to the river to pick mushrooms. Do you want to come with me?" One morning, Zhao Hongyu had just left his tent when he saw a young girl in a military coat approaching him. "Haha, Emma, your leg is healed now, isn't it?" Zhao Hongyu greeted with a smile. He remembered this girl very clearly, for she was Black Bear's daughter, the one accidentally injured by the whites. If it weren't for Zhao Hongyu's treatment, the little girl would likely have died. The little girl was young, only about 11 or 12 years old. Her green military coat made her look thin and petite. "I'm going to the river to pick mushrooms. Are you coming?" The little girl had a fondness for her lifesaver. After all, without Zhao Hongyu, she would have been dead by now. Furthermore, Zhao Hongyu, this outsider, looked different from the others in the tribe. His hair was dark, and his eyes were like black, shimmering gemstones, very beautiful. His features blended seamlessly with the tribe, and he always wore a smile no matter who he spoke to, bringing a sense of comfort. Unlike the other boys and men in the tribe, who spoke in a snarly, annoying voice or shouted loudly, this little girl, Emma, thoroughly enjoyed chatting with Zhao Hongyu. "Oh, Emma, are you going to the river? I haven't been there yet, and I don't have much else to do anyway, so I'll go with you." Zhao Hongyu thought for a moment and decided that since he had things to do, it wouldn't hurt to accompany the little girl. Besides, it wouldn't be safe for the little girl to go there alone. It would be dangerous if there were wild animals around. You know, the ice and snow have melted now, and some wild animals have emerged from hibernation and are searching for food to restore their strength. Upon hearing Zhao Hongyu accept her invitation, the little girl's face lit up with an innocent smile. Honestly, this daughter of Black Bear is quite pretty. Though she's still young, it's clear she'll grow up to be a beauty. However, because everyone has different tastes in beauty, what Zhao Hongyu considers beautiful is considered ugly by the children of the Mohawk tribe. Indian aesthetics, for both men and women, favors faces that appear to have been shaped by an axe or knife, with sharp angles. For someone like Emma, who agrees with Zhao Hongyu's aesthetic standards, it's truly gossipy. In fact, in the eyes of the Mohawk people, Zhao Hongyu himself is no less ugly. It's just that because he's a Tito's brother, saved the tribe leader's life, and has a close personal relationship with the shaman, the Mohawk people keep quiet. Not far away, Emma's father, Black Bear, the bravest warrior of the Mohawks, approached. "Dad, I'm going to the river with Zhao to pick mushrooms. You don't have to worry about my safety with him here," the little girl shouted happily at her father as he approached. Black Bear, with his fleshy face, tall stature, and blue tattoos, looked like a demon from hell. Upon seeing his daughter, a gentle expression crossed his face. "Oh, I'm relieved that Zhao's with you." Black Bear approached and nodded at Zhao Hongyu. He wasn't the most talkative person. Although he was deeply grateful to Zhao Hongyu, he wouldn't say anything. Zhao Hongyu had no thoughts about this taciturn fellow. After all, that was just his personality. Just now, someone from the nearby Punk tribe informed us that merchants from the Whiteskins and the Qian camp are on their way to our tribe. I have no good feelings towards these Whiteskins. Now that you can provide our tribe with everything we need, what use are those Whiteskins anymore? Black Bear said, looking at Zhao Hongyu with an expressionless face. Zhao Hongyu knew what Black Bear, the Mohawk radical, was thinking and what he was planning. However, he didn't want to get involved in the affairs of the Mohawk tribe, as it would cause him great trouble. Zhao Hongyu didn't respond, but simply looked at Black Bear with a smile on his face. "I'll go get rid of those merchants today, but you have to think of a solution too. Those Whiteskins need our furs, but you've already traded them away. Those greedy guys might end up using you against them." Black Bear was no fool. He saw the essence of the problem clearly. Zhao Hongyu was stunned. He had never expected the seemingly dull Black Bear to say such a thing. Ignoring Zhao Hongyu's reaction, Black Bear turned and walked away. Emma rolled up her oversized sleeves and reached out her small hand to tug at Zhao Hongyu. "Hey Tong, let's hurry up. Spring mushrooms are at their peak flavor. A lot of kids are already there. If we're late, they'll all be gone." "What the hell is this? Am I a babysitter?" Zhao Hongyu smiled wryly inwardly, shook his head, and after instructing Wang Shan, he led Zhang Tai and his 4 men, accompanied by Emma, toward the Hudson River. Chapter 18 The Little Brother in Emma's Eyes. The Hudson River basin stretches far, flowing north through Quebec and south into the coastal waters near Manhattan. Dense, primeval forests crisscross the Hudson River. This forest, a natural granary gifted to the Mohawk tribe, is home to dozens of animal species and a wide variety of useful plants and fungi. In the 17th century, before heavy industry became widespread, these natural resources remained largely untouched. New green buds have sprouted from the branches of the trees, bringing spring to life in the forest. Whoosh! Buzz! A wild rabbit, searching for grass, was pierced by a wooden arrow and pinned to the ground. The arrow's powerful inertia caused it to tremble after piercing the rabbit's body before slowly recovering. Song Hu, dressed in a 17th century European-style leather jacket and beaver fur coat, approached, bent down, and tied the still twitching rabbit to his waist. "Hey, this trip has yielded quite a few rewards, truly a fruitful one." Besides the newly tethered hare, he also had 2 colorful pheasants tied to his waist. After a few months in the Moxigan tribe, Song Hu and his companions had mastered the art of archery with pinpoint accuracy. "Uncle, you're amazing." Emma stared at him with sparkling eyes after watching Song Hu pierce the hare with an arrow. Song Hu slung his longbow proudly across his back and said to the sparkling girl, "That's nothing. I'm incredibly powerful. Even if a black bear comes along, I can take it down all by myself." In front of his fans, Song Hu boasted resoundingly. But Emma was naive and believed him. Emma, wearing a green military coat and a pair of khaki leather boots, looked very much like the 1960s and 1970s. These are all fed pure, pollution-free feed. In the 21st century, this pheasant alone would be worth 1,000 yuan. Zhao Hongyu swallowed and whispered to Song Hu. "The chief means we should hunt more, depending on the situation." He blinked. "Nonsense. Wildlife is plentiful in this era, but there's no wildlife protection law. As long as you can hunt them, you can hunt as many as you want. Even if you're hunting black bears, it's fine." In such an era, Zhao Hongyu wouldn't be so foolish as to bother with wildlife protection laws. As he himself said, in the 17th century, wildlife was incredibly abundant in America. If you could hunt them, then go for it. It wouldn't be wrong to prioritize your stomach. At worst, I could wait until I'm stronger and issue an order to dissuade people from doing this. Besides, this wasn't the era of the widespread development of firearms. The devastation of wildlife actually occurred after the 18th century. So, it was too early to worry about this issue in the 17th century. That was over 100 years ago. He could completely ignore these issues for the next 100 years. Song Hu gave a wicked smile and nodded, indicating he understood. "Let's go mushroom hunting around here. I've always gone here. It's my secret, no one else knows." Emma shared her secret with Zhao Hongyu. Yes, Emma had always been the one who picked the most mushrooms in the tribe. Her family never lacked mushrooms, because she had a secret: she knew a place where they were grown. A white mist rose from the forest, perhaps because spring had arrived and the snow had melted. The confluence of cold and warm air currents, coupled with a gradually rising morning temperature, created a thick fog. Towering ancient trees were covered in green moss. In the soil beneath the trees, so thick it would take 5 or 6 people to hug, young green shoots were just beginning to emerge. Fungi abounded. Haha, this is my secret mushroom garden. I knew I'd never come back empty-handed. Seeing the plump mushrooms, Emma cheered and ran over, beginning to pick them non-stop. Emma, a young girl, put the mushrooms she had picked into her green military messenger bag and happily hummed an Indian tune. Songhu assigned 4 of his men to guard the surrounding area, while he himself stayed close to Zhao Hongyu. The forest was a kilometer from the Mohawk camp, not far, but not close either. After all, in those days, without cars, one had to rely on foot. He wondered when the space-time trading machine would allow the sale of animals like cattle, horses, and sheep. Buying a few horses would be much more convenient then. Current life was truly inconvenient for Zhao Hongyu. Accustomed to all manner of transportation, Zhao Hongyu was frustrated by having to walk everywhere. Even a horse would be nice. Unfortunately, he knew horses weren't native to the Americas. So, for the time being, his little dream remained unattainable. In the 21st century, wild horses galloped across the western plains of the Americas, giving the illusion that horses were plentiful there. This was, in fact, a mistake. Before the discovery of the Americas, horses were completely non-existent. History explains the subsequent appearance of wild horses in the Americas, which swelled to tens of millions, as explained by historians. The wild horse population peaked at over 10 million in the mid-16th century, after 1550, but that was in the mid-18th century. It was only the early 17th century, so Zhao Hongyu knew his only hope was the space-time trader. However, this required his own investment and development. The space-time trader was incredibly expensive. Without the money, there was no point in even thinking about it. Coo, clatter. From time to time, the call of an unknown bird could be heard in the forest, along with the rustling of branches as some bird flew through the trees. As time passed, the sun slowly rose higher. The sunlight finally dispelled the white mist, allowing for clearer vision. About 100 meters from Zhao Hongyu and his companions, a small stream, about 5 or 6 meters wide, appeared. I was wondering why the fog was so thick. Now, there's a stream just up ahead, Zhao Hongyu said to Songhu after spotting the stream. The forest mist had been dispelled by the sun, but a faint white mist still rose from the surface of the stream, bathed in the sunlight. It was truly refreshing. You wouldn't see such a sight in the 21st century, at least not in China. Zhao Hongyu sighed. Brother, I've picked a lot of mushrooms. I'll have Mom make you mushroom soup when we get back. Emma, already filled with mushrooms, trotted over excitedly. A blush tinged the little girl's face, and beads of sweat formed on her forehead. Perhaps because Zhao Hongyu had become younger after traveling through time and space, Emma liked to call him brother. Zhao Hongyu had no objection to this title. After all, his appearance and the system's stats indicated he was only 15. Compared to Emma, he wasn't much older. Emma is so capable. You've already picked so many mushrooms. I think Emma is the most skilled mushroom picker in the Moxigan tribe, Zhao Hongyu said to Emma, half jokingly and half complimentingly. Emma's smile widened at Zhao Hongyu's words. She raised her face slightly, pursed her pink lips, and tilted her head, looking proud. Brother, you're right. I'm always the one who picks the most mushrooms. No one can compare to me. Being a child, Emma's pride was instantly puffed up by Zhao Hongyu's praise. Emma enjoyed chatting with Zhao Hongyu. Besides the fact that he had saved her and his good looks, his sweet talk also played a big role. Encouragement and praise were generally not part of the Moxigan tribe's child-rearing practices. No matter how well you do, parents always just nod their heads in approval with a stern face. This approach can sometimes be very disappointing to children and even demotivate them. But Zhao Hongyu is different. He's a 21st century man. His education and experiences are beyond the reach of those in the Moxigan tribe. Although Zhao Hongyu has never been married and has no experience raising children, he's still a person who's seen pigs run. After all, in this age of information explosion, he knows a thing or two. Therefore, he has a unique way of dealing with people. This has endeared him to both adults and children in the Moxigan tribe. Of course, everyone feels sorry for him because Zhao Hongyu is truly ugly. If only he had some tattoos or a more angular face. If Zhao Hongyu knew what the Moxigan people thought, he'd probably want to die. After all, Zhao Hongyu is currently very pleased with his youthful appearance. Back when he was 15 or 16, he was considered the most handsome boy on campus because of his looks. From middle school to high school and even college, many senior students couldn't resist pursuing him. It was a pity that such a handsome boy was actually called ugly in the Moxigan tribe. He was really sad. However, people have different aesthetic standards, and this cannot be forced. Just as Emma was a cute little girl in Zhao Hongyu's eyes, she was also called ugly by other children. Emma walked over and stood in front of Zhao Hongyu. Zhao Hongyu raised his hand and randomly fiddled with her hair, which made the little girl pout and start playing with him. Suddenly, the forest was filled with crisp laughter. Chapter 19. Deep in the forest. It's still early, let's not go back yet. Zhao Hongyu glanced at the sky. It was only a little after 9 in the morning, still quite early. 2 pheasants and a hare aren't enough food. Let's hunt some more. After playing around for a while, Zhao Hongyu sat down on the ground and suggested, tilting his head. Emma certainly didn't want to go back so early either. She was at the age of playfulness. Okay, I know a place with plenty of prey, Emma said happily to Zhao Hongyu. Since Emma knew where the animals often appeared, it was a good thing. It would save Zhao Hongyu and the others a lot of trouble. Wait a moment, I want to leave a mark here. This is your first time accompanying me to the secret mushroom garden. As she spoke, Emma pulled a small white stone from her military coat pocket, then found a black stone and began to draw on the smooth rock surface. Indians also like to scribble on rocks and cliffs, which Zhao Hongyu found very interesting. He walked over, intending to see how good the little girl's graffiti was. However, when Emma pulled the small white stone from her pocket, Zhao Hongyu's eyes widened, as if he had witnessed something incredible. Emma, can you show me that little stone in your hand? Zhao Hongyu's voice trembled with excitement. The stone was ringed with a golden metallic ring, gleaming with a unique luster in the sunlight. Hearing this, Emma paused her graffiti, turned back to the excited Zhao Hongyu, raised her right hand, and handed the small white stone over. What's so good about this? I know there are a lot of them somewhere. Emma thought this brother Zhao's reaction today was really strange. They were just some small stones. They were useless except for leaving white marks on black rock. The children in the tribe didn't like these stones. I just picked up a few from my own doodles. Had this big brother never seen these stones before? Well, if that's the case, I'll just take him to that place to pick up a few more. Emma found it a bit amusing, but she also thought Zhao Hongyu was quite cute. Oh my god, an 11 or 12-year-old Indian girl actually thought Zhao Hongyu, a 15-year-old boy, was cute. If Zhao Hongyu knew what she was thinking, he'd probably be so ashamed he'd just crawl into a hole. Zhao Hongyu had no idea what Emma was thinking. He lowered his head and stared at the small white stone in his hand, his expression serious and solemn. He toyed with the stone in his hands, his mind racing with thoughts. The golden substance coating the stone, if I'm not mistaken, it's gold. The sunlight filtered through the forest branches. The golden shimmering light instantly caught the eye and made one's heart tremble. This must be quartz. Zhao Hongyu quickly formed a preliminary judgment. Seeing Zhao Hongyu fall silent, staring at the stone, Emma fell silent. She stood quietly beside Zhao Hongyu, tilting her head to study the boy. She couldn't understand why this young man was so interested in such a useless stone. She truly had no idea. Songhu approached, stopping beside Zhao Hongyu and whispering, "Chief, is this gold?" Zhao Hongyu nodded silently. It should be. If it weren't gold, its luster wouldn't be so dazzling. He tossed the white stone in his hand and said to Songhu, "Do you know what kind of stone this is?" Songhu shook his head and replied in a muffled voice, "I'm not a geology and mining major. How could I possibly know what this stone is?" Songhu, with only an elementary school education, sighed in frustration. If he hadn't been drafted into the military, he wouldn't have known so much. 3 years of compulsory military service wasn't for nothing. But even so, he couldn't possibly know what the stone in Zhao Hongyu's hand was. Zhao Hongyu smiled and said to Songhu, "This is quartzite. There's nothing special about this kind of stone. It's just that this kind of quartzite vein often contains another metal, gold." When he mentioned the quartzite veins being gold, Zhao Hongayu's face lit up with excitement. Oh, there's actually such a thing. Song Hu also piqued his interest. This was the first time he'd heard of this. Meanwhile, Song Hu sighed inwardly, thinking that being educated was a virtue. The leader's education was superior to someone like him with only an elementary school diploma. Zhao Hongyu smiled and shook his head, remaining silent. He knew this was related to his education, but it was simply because, living in the 21st century with its booming information industry, he'd spent his free time browsing the internet and learned this. After all, in this age of internet development and information technology, even the most nerdy of people who never leave their homes often possessed information unknown to the average person. After a moment's silence, Zhao Hongyu said, I suspect there's a large quartz vein nearby, and also a gold mine. I'm just not sure of its size or the difficulty of mining. After hearing Zhao Hongyu's words, Song Hu said casually, let's go take a look. Instead of speculating here, why not see what's going on there and then make a judgment? Zhao Hongyu nodded, then turned to the young girl, Emma, and said, you said there's a lot of this stone nearby. Could you take me there? Emma listened to Zhao Hongyu and Song Hu's conversation, but she couldn't understand a word of it. What about veins, quartz, gold? It was also confusing to her. It wasn't surprising that the girl didn't understand. After all, with almost 400 years between them, the gap in knowledge and generation was enormous. However, when Zhao Hongyu asked her to take him to the place only she knew about, the girl happily agreed. Little brother, you're right. Only Emma knows that place. Emma knows many secrets of this forest. Emma proudly lifted her little face and straightened her frail body. Zhao Hongyu and Song Hu smiled at her childish expression. Emma was right. The other children in this forest didn't like to play here. Even if they came here to pick mushrooms, they wouldn't go deep into the forest. Only the little girl Emma was brave enough to explore alone and unearth the secrets of the deep forest. It was because of this that Emma discovered this mushroom-filled forest and the quartz and gold deposits. Zhao Hongyu had good luck. Unlike the Incas along the Caribbean coast of Central America, the North American Indians didn't value gold at all. Because of this, the British near Virginia were still unaware of the gold in this area. Otherwise, the British would have conquered the area and begun extensive mining. Humph, now that I'm here, those European idiots who own this gold can forget about it. No matter who tries to steal it, I'll make sure they don't get away with it. Following Emma, Zhao Hongyu's mind raced. They followed a stream deeper into the forest, a journey that lasted about an hour. Along the way, Zhao Hongyu spotted all sorts of small animals and birds. Wild boars, squirrels, badgers, groundhogs, fawns, pheasants, lynxes, foxes, coyotes. Upon noticing Zhao Hongyu and his group, the critters scurried off into the forest. This disappointed Emma, as they were all prey. But Zhao Hongyu wasn't focused on hunting anymore. He had to quickly determine if there were any quartz veins or gold mines in that area. If he truly discovered a gold mine, and the yield was enormous, it would bring him enormous profits. Selling gold to the space-time trader was more profitable than buying furs. The fur trade is currently declining. The profit from just a dozen or so furs a day is too little, and the quality of those furs is also quite variable, making it a real headache. But if a gold mine were discovered, it would provide a new source of income and bring a qualitative leap forward in his development in the short term. At 320 yuan per gram, the mine here should yield at least 50 grams a day. And that's the minimum output. If the vein is rich, the yield could be even higher. At that point, I could buy genetically modified humans if I wanted, and invest in a stronghold if I wanted. It wouldn't be long before my tribe could expand rapidly. With more manpower, I wouldn't have to worry about safety issues anymore. And with the investment, the stronghold might even be able to purchase some machinery and vehicles. Hey! The more Zhao Hongyu thought about it, the more excited he became. He felt happiness was just around the corner. It's right here. Go upstream from that stream ahead. There are lots of these rocks. Emma, who was leading the way, suddenly stopped, pointed ahead, and turned to Zhao Hongyu. Zhao Hongyu and Song Hu followed Emma's finger. A fawn drinking water up ahead had been startled and was hopping deeper into the forest, quickly disappearing into the distance. Elven squirrels crouched in the branches of the yellow zhen trees lining the stream, watching the outsiders. Zhao Hongyu, Wang Hu, and 4 of their gene-human subordinates, accompanied Emma, as they slowly approached. Chief, look, Song Hu's eyesight was sharp. He immediately noticed something unusual in the shallow stream. Chapter 20: A Glittering Discovery. Chief, look what that is. Song Hu seemed excited and thrilled, his face lit up with surprise. Zhao Hongyu peered closely and saw golden veins emerging beneath the surface of the shallow stream. Holy crap! Gold mines are actually exposed just above the surface. No wonder Song Hu was so excited. Not to mention Song Hu, Zhao Hongyu's heart immediately began to beat wildly when he saw the veins of gold visible beneath the stream's surface. Zhao Hongyu took a few steps into the stream. The water wasn't very deep, just above his calves and below his knees. Zhao Hongyu's leather boots, though hand-sewn, were quite waterproof, thanks to the nutria for lining the boots. The stream water in early spring was bitingly cold. Most people would definitely not be able to withstand it. However, Zhao Hongyu, wearing his long leather boots, wasn't afraid. After all, the icy water wouldn't seep into his boots for a while. He looked down and saw the golden substance coating the rocks beneath the stream's surface. It was indeed gold. Meanwhile, tiny metallic particles lay quietly beneath the water's surface, reflecting an alluring luster in the sunlight filtering through the forest. It seemed there must be a gold mine upstream, perhaps even larger. However, this was also likely the starting point of the gold vein. Following the stream upstream, there should be more discoveries. Zhao Hongyu pondered for a moment, and a sense of certainty settled in his mind. Song Hu looked left and right, then squatted down by the stream and reached under the water to grab a handful. Zhao Hongyu also emerged from the stream and strolled over to Song Hu's side. Chief, there's quite a bit of gold here. Look, I just grabbed a handful, Song Hu said, placing his palm before Zhao Hongyu's eyes. Zhao Hongyu peered closely and saw that, as Song Hu had predicted, his palm contained not only some mud and gravel, but also numerous shimmering gold particles. Those gold particles weren't small at all. The smallest were the size of 5 or 6 grains of rice, while the largest were even the size of a fingernail. Hiss, Zhao Hongyu gasped, thinking, oh my god. The gold mine here is so rich. Song Hu just grabbed a handful and already grabbed 7 or 8 grains. This is ridiculous. Although Zhao Hongyu found it somewhat unbelievable, the facts were clear. The gold particles in Song Hu's hand were not deceiving. They shimmered before Zhao Hongyu's eyes, tantalizing him. Big brother, look, there are a lot of white stones here. Just as he was in a trance, feeling that nothing was real, the voice of the little girl Emma rang out, bringing Zhao Hongyu back to his senses. What's going on? Zhao Hongyu, regaining his composure, turned to look at the little girl Emma. He looked in the direction Emma pointed and was stunned again. Just to the right of the stream, 10 meters upstream, in front of them, stood a rock mass. After countless years of erosion by wind and snow, a large section of the rock had fallen away. Perhaps because some of the surface had only recently sloughed off, it still looked fresh. However, the areas that remained intact were covered with the green moss. Where the rock had sloughed off, white quartz emerged, and clinging to it were streaks of golden metal. I'm going to get rich. Zhao Hongyu ran over, took a closer look, and exclaimed inwardly. Yes, his suspicions were correct. There was a massive quartz vein here. At the same time, a semi-ferrous gold vein, part of the quartz vein, had also appeared in the same area. Zhao Hongyu approached the little girl, Emma, reached under her arms, lifted her up with both hands, and spun her around. Emma, you're my lucky star. I'm going to get rich this time. I'm going to get rich. Zhao Hongyu spun Emma around, happily spouting nonsense. What was getting rich? Emma was a little confused, she didn't understand the meaning of the word. But seeing Zhao Hongyu's face beaming with joy, she stopped dwelling on it. The boy was quite strong, actually lifting her up and spinning around in circles. It was so much fun. Emma giggled, enjoying Zhao Hongyu's behavior. Though Emma was young, Indian girls were well developed. Her small breasts were already plump, and Zhao Hongyu would often touch them. But Zhao Hongyu had no obscene thoughts, he was simply expressing his joy. And judging by Emma's expression, she didn't seem to mind. If this had happened in the Ming Dynasty, Zhao Hongyu would have been labeled obscene for doing this. Even in the 21st century, such behavior would be considered a serious matter. But Indians don't have any rules about sex, and Emma wouldn't get all excited, trembling, or blushing just because Zhao Hongyu touched her. You have to remember that before Zhao Hongyu arrived in the Mohawk tribe, when his black cotton military coat became a must-have item in the tribe, the women of the Mohawk tribe were all bare. To say they were bare was a bit extreme, But two strips of cloth held up by a piece of twine, barely covering the front and back, could they really be considered pants? Even a slight bend while working would reveal everything. And Indian women of that era didn't wear clothes. Of course, there was no such thing as a body that couldn't be seen in Indian tribes. After all, Indians didn't learn etiquette, morality, or morals. Zhao Hongyu also knew he couldn't impose 21st century moral standards on the Indians of 1620. That was completely unrealistic. When Emma was treating her, the young girl had shown him her naked body. She was perfectly lucid at the time and didn't react much. Emma saw it as nothing serious, it was perfectly normal, and she didn't harbor any filthy thoughts. Zhao Hongyu, however, blushed and felt a surge of emotion. But then, reflecting on it, he realized how shameless he had been. At that moment, Emma's eyes were pure and innocent. And Zhao Hongyu had also observed that the men of the Mohawk tribe, when interacting with nearly naked women, had eyes that were pure and devoid of lust. Ultimately, Zhao Hongyu came to what he considered a rather ridiculous conclusion, that while humanity and society were developing, they were actually degenerating. At the very least, morally, they couldn't compare to the Indians. Despite their glamorous attire, they were all thieves and haulers at heart. On the other hand, the Indians, despite their naked bodies, were incredibly pure at heart. Ahem, I got it wrong. After a few turns, Zhao Hongyu felt a bit dizzy, so he finally put Emma down. I'll give you a few extra packets of pickled mustard greens as a reward when we get home, God bless you. Emma had given Zhao Hongyu such a vast gold mine, yet he only gave her a few packets of pickled mustard greens as a reward. What a stingy person. But Emma's eyes lit up, and she nodded happily. The Mohawks didn't have much decent food these days, and eating meat all the time would get boring. They also grew potatoes and corn, but they weren't very tasty when just boiled into paste with a little water. Therefore, the pickled mustard greens Zhao Hongyu sold became a popular food among the Mohawks. However, the Mohawks complained that the quantity was too small. Think about it, at 50 cents a packet, how much pickled mustard greens could you possibly get? Zhao Hongyu had no recourse but to tell the complaining Mohawks that if they wanted more food, they could trade for more furs. Consequently, some of the greedy individuals went out hunting even before the snow melted. With their black heart cotton military coats and underwear, they didn't have to worry about being cold. This ensured Zhao Hongyu's trade continued throughout the winter. It must be said that the Mohawks were quite the foodie. The same could be said of the little girl, Emma. Although she had no furs, she frequently came to chat with Zhao Hongyu. As they chatted, it was already noon, and when Zhao Hongyu was ready for lunch, she would invite the little girl to join them. This was precisely the moment Emma had been waiting for. Emma was incredibly clever, she had observed him for a long time. She had noticed that this powerful healer was very polite. When it was time to eat, he would always invite everyone to join him. She knew it was called politeness. Of course, adults wouldn't do this, they all had their own dignity. Therefore, many politely declined the invitation. But Emma is not that stupid, she wants to eat that kind of pickled mustard greens. However, most of the pickled mustard greens at home are eaten by her father because he eats so much. So smart Emma has to find her way by herself. She claims to be the smartest child in the tribe, and soon Emma found her way. Zhao Hongyu was just a little girl, and she didn't see the other party's intentions at all, so she was fooled. And Emma finally used her wisdom to solve the problem of her greed. But she can't go there every day. Although she is young, she also knows that it is not good to do things too much. We agreed that you must not lie. It's just a few bags of pickled mustard greens, I won't lie, Zhao Hongyu said to Emma with a serious face, laughing and crying. Chapter 21 A Visiting Merchant. After confirming the presence of a large gold vein, Zhao Hongyu had Song Hu mark the spot, and then he, Emma, and the others headed back. Now that he'd discovered the gold mine, Zhao Hongyu didn't want to waste time, he had to get production underway. However, he was short on manpower, so he considered asking Atido for some help. The Mohicans had a population of over 10,000, so borrowing some men to work shouldn't be a problem. Besides, if he didn't lend them, he could always trade them for rice, or guo tao, or pickled mustard greens. As long as they found gold in the stream and gave it to him, he could exchange it for his goods. This would be a good deal for both him and the Mohicans, and Atido and his father wouldn't refuse. The Mohicans didn't need gold, they needed iron pots, axes, and machetes. But he didn't need those things, he needed gold. Just now, Song Hu casually grabbed 7 or 8 gold grains. Zhao Hongyu secretly sold the gold to the space-time trader while Emma wasn't paying attention. You wouldn't know until you sold it, but once you did, you were shocked. The gold was incredibly pure, and the system offered a high price of 330 yuan. Prices fluctuate with the 21st century market. And Song Hu's handful of gold weighed a staggering 20 grams. Just a casual grab, and yet there were 20 grams 6,600 yuan. Just such a casual grab. If he had the tools to sift through the gold, wouldn't he be able to harvest even more gold in a day? Swallowing his saliva, Zhao Hongyu felt his future was radiant and bright. Emma occasionally glanced up at the young man, lost in his fantasy. She thought he was being incredibly strange today. It was just a bunch of useless stuff, so why did he become so upset after seeing it? He was so lost over a bunch of useful things. How foolish. Emma shook her head helplessly. Those golden things can't be eaten, nor can they be made into hard axes and tools. They are really useless. Only a fool like the little brother would care so much about them. Emma felt that she should tell her father after returning home, and then let her father persuade the little brother. She didn't want the little brother to spend all his energy on these useful things. Men should go hunting and fight those ferocious bison. Become warriors. Of course, if they can kill a few whiteskins, it would be even better. In Emma's heart, the little brother will definitely become the kind of hero she admires. So, how could she bear to see the little brother do such a brainless thing? Emma reached out and grasped the large piece of metal in her coat pocket, and made a decision in her heart. Emma picked up the metal and put it in her pocket when no one was paying attention. If Zhao Hongyu saw it, he would definitely scream out its name. Doghead Gold. Black Bear, Lawrence says he's buying all your tribe's furs this year. He'll trade you iron products, and the quantities are guaranteed to satisfy you. An Indian, dressed in a European-style cotton coat and with the hairstyle of a modern hippie, but with a look of an indigenous Indian, spoke to Black Bear, the Mohican's fiercest warrior, inside the Mohican tribe's meeting tent. Next to him sat a stout, blonde, blue-eyed European. Several tall, white guards in leather armor stood behind the stout man. More guards stood outside the tent. Across from them sat Black Bear and Atito, along with the shaman, the old chief Samra, and some of the tribal elders. With stern faces, they listened quietly as the Indian trader finished what he had to say. The man speaking to Black Bear, dressed in a European-style cotton coat but with an Indian face, was called Sandori. He was a member of the Punks, a tribe of 3,000 south of the Mohicans with close relations with the British. They were often exploited by the British as a thorn in the side of the surrounding Indians. Any small tribe showing even the slightest sign of hostility would be annihilated by the British and the Punks, and the women of those exterminated tribes would become slaves of the Punks and the British. Of course, the Punks would occasionally use the British to eliminate their enemies. And the British would use the Punks to attack other tribes, seizing their fertile land for agricultural or mining purposes. As for pretexts for war, they were easy to find, weren't they? Black Bear, who had always had a negative impression of the white skin, didn't show much expression. Not only him, but even Atito, who was always timid and indecisive, showed no sign of emotion. This was a bit puzzling to Sandori, who had always dealt with them. Also, on this visit, he witnessed many puzzling changes within the Mohegan tribe. For a moment, he wondered if he'd found the wrong tribe, or even if the Mohawks no longer existed, or had been absorbed by other Indian tribes. The vast Mohawks, men and women alike, were all dressed in green clothing. They looked as clumsy as fat brown bears, but judging by their expressions, they seemed quite comfortable. Even the white people who had followed him to the Mohawks to trade with them were interested in these clothes. Meanwhile, the Mohawks, who had always been cautious about trading with white people, had seen a surge in refined weapons. The black iron axes and machetes, as well as the daggers used by the warriors for cutting flesh, caught the sunlight, occasionally reflecting a cold gleam that made Sandili squint. Logically, the Mohawks, who rarely interacted with white people, should possess such fine iron weapons. It simply didn't make sense. This question had lingered in Sandori's mind ever since he entered the Mohawk tribe, and he couldn't quite put it to rest. Meanwhile, Baker, the wholesaler who had followed Sandori, had a plan in mind. In the eyes of this shrewd British businessman, the Mohawk tribe was a formidable force. They possessed a vast population and sophisticated weaponry. With a population of 13,000, they were a veritable hegemon in this coastal region. Even if all the British colonies were combined, the Mohawk tribe's population wouldn't surpass that of the Mohawk tribe. Therefore, Baker believed that such a powerful tribe should be treated well and wooed. Furthermore, such a powerful tribe would undoubtedly bring greater benefits to the British than a smaller tribe like the Punks. However, such a large tribe was not easily won over and controlled. He had to find a way to weaken the Mohawk tribe's power. From the British perspective, having such a powerful tribe near their colony wasn't necessarily a good thing. Furthermore, the Indians weren't always easy to deal with, so Baker had some ulterior motives. Another major concern was where the Mohawk warriors' fine iron weapons came from. Indians lack metallurgy, making it impossible for them to forge such sophisticated weapons. For the Indians, the most convenient and preferred way to acquire iron tools and weapons was to exchange them for furs and gold, which were useful to them. Europeans had known this for over 100 years, and the Indians hadn't changed. Baker didn't believe the Indians were experiencing any unexpected developments. Therefore, in his view, the emergence of such sophisticated iron weapons among the Mohawks must have been the work of the French to the north. With every European nation eager to capture a share of the American pie and profit from it, such a situation was understandable. Baker's greatest concern was the close relationship between the Mohawk Indians and the French. This was the area he needed to focus on. While relations between the British and French during this era hadn't reached the levels of the 7 Years' War that would ensue over a century later, minor conflicts did occur. Both the French and the British would periodically instigate Indian tribes to attack those with whom they had good relations, cutting off the power of their opponents and weakening their strength. Even the Spanish and Portuguese would occasionally get involved. Baker felt a sense of unease as he pondered these issues. Sandily. Ask these Mohicans where they get those ridiculously large clothes they wear and the sharp weapons their warriors carry on their waists. Just as Baker finished speaking, an Indian girl, also wearing a green military coat, bowed her head respectfully before him and sandally, holding a large wooden bowl in both hands. This was Indian etiquette, the way they treated guests to their tribe. Although the Mohicans weren't particularly fond of white people, Sanderly and Baker had come with good intentions, so they treated them as guests would be treated. Baker had dealt with Indians many times before, and he understood that this was their way of treating guests, so he didn't show any surprise. Sanderly was similarly surprised. However, when they both fixed their gaze on the wooden bowl in the hands of the girl kneeling before them, their eyes suddenly widened, as if they had seen something incredible. Seeing the expressions on their faces, the Mohicans sitting around in the tent all curled their lips slightly and exchanged glances. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22 Satan. Hi, hey Tong, you're back. Yes, I just accompanied Emma to the nearby forest and picked some mushrooms for lunch. Back at the Mohawk camp, everyone greeted Zhao Hongyu. Everyone in the Mohawk tribe showed great kindness and friendship to Zhao Hongyu, the man who had transformed their lives. They sincerely hoped that Zhao Hongyu would bring them even more good things in the future. Along the way, Zhao Hongyu greeted them constantly, and he responded with a smile. When they arrived at the large tent in the center of the camp, Zhao Hongyu's pupils constricted. He saw dozens of white-skinned people standing outside chatting. Europeans. Yes, Zhao Hongyu recognized them. From their attire and skin color, it was easy to tell that they were Europeans from the American continent. What were these people doing in the Mohawk tribe? Zhao Hongyu pondered, his mind baffled. Could it be that they also knew about the gold mine in the stream deep in the forest? Zhao Hongyu's heart sank at this thought. Of course, he felt his guess wasn't entirely reliable. After all, he'd only just learned about the gold there. And it was unlikely these Europeans had known about it before him, so his guess couldn't be right. But why were they here? HMPH. Those annoying white people are here again. They come to our tribe every spring. Just as Zhao Hongyu was lost in thought, Emma's once smiling face suddenly turned cold and serious. She looked at the white people with disgust. When Zhao Hongyu heard Emma's words, he understood. Emma, are these white people coming to our tribe to trade? Zhao Hongyu stopped and squatted to ask. Emma nodded and replied, yes, these greedy white people come to our tribe every spring to trade furs with us. But the price they offer is really low. It's not fair at all. Her tone betrayed deep resentment. But I think they'll definitely return empty-handed this time, because all the furs in the tribe have been traded away by you, Hey Tong. Emma's face lit up again as she spoke of this. It was clear that the young woman was delighted that the white people didn't benefit. Indeed, since Zhao Hongayu's arrival, he had practically acquired all the furs in the Mohawk tribe. Now, the Mohawk tribe didn't have a single fur in stock. Therefore, the white people would definitely return empty-handed this time. Emma was absolutely right. We need a fair exchange, but these white people are simply too greedy. The prices they offer are far from fair. We may not be able to craft those iron tools, but we're not stupid. The young woman's face lit up with indignation as she spoke of the prices offered by the European merchants. Zhao Honggai remained silent. What could he say? Productivity dictates certain things, and that can't be changed. The Indians' immense demand for iron products determined the outcome of certain events. Coupled with their lack of economic knowledge, it was only natural that they were deceived by the Europeans. Throughout history, Indians have always been trapped in this vicious cycle. It's only because of their arrival that some minor deviations may have occurred. Wow! This is delicious. What kind of food is this? Baker asked, putting down the delicate wooden bowl. Friends from a distant tribe brought us a delicacy from the Mohicans, adding a new food to our tribe. Atito proudly recounted the origins of the pickled mustard greens. Baker's eyes flickered for a moment, and then he asked casually, "Are these foods given away for free? If so, I'd like to take some back." As Baker finished speaking, Atito rolled his eyes and replied, "As you white people say, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Besides, we wouldn't accept anything from our friends for free. We exchanged furs for it." Atito's father gave Atito a sharp look, but the young man didn't see it. "Such delicious food. I wonder how much a single skin can fetch," Baker asked, slowly lowering his head. He needed a rough estimate to calculate the profit this pickled mustard would bring. The perceptive Baker sensed that this man, whom the Mohicans called a friend, might be a formidable business rival. One beaver pelt can be exchanged for 50 bags of mustard. It's a very good deal. Compared to what you white people are getting, I think it's very fair. This time, the person who answered Baker's question was Black Bear, the Mohicans' foremost warrior, sitting next to Tito. He chuckled dryly, calculating rapidly in his mind. He'd never know until he figured it out, but after this calculation, Baker gasped. This little piece of mustard might seem insignificant, but it was a true gold-making machine. A nutria skin might not mean much to the Mohicans, but to Baker, it was pure silver. He only needed to get a single beaver pelt, wait for the arrival of a ship in April, and sell it to the captain for 4 French livres. In the past, he only had to pay a few sous silver coins for a low-quality axe and could get 30 or 40 nautical skins in exchange. This was pure profiteering. Of course, if it weren't for such huge profits, why would Baker risk coming to the American continent? In the subsequent casual conversation, Baker learned more and more details. Although the Mohawk people didn't want to reveal too much information about Zhao Honggayu to Baker, they had no way to resist the traps Baker set in his words, and the information was gradually extracted. The son of the leader of an Indian tribe from the north, this tribe was at war with the French. This tribe also possessed advanced technology that was completely different from any Indian tribe they had encountered. This tribe, called the Zhao, possessed smelting technology that could forge razor-sharp iron knives. Baker could confirm this, having carefully observed the machetes and axes carried by the Mohawk warriors. Indeed, the workmanship was much finer and sharper than what he was selling. Baker already felt that his business was doomed. No, I must find a way to wipe out this tribe. If I don't, how can I continue this lucrative fur trade? Baker made a silent decision. For Baker, the Mohican tribe had always been his largest source of furs. Every spring, he could trade his low-quality scrap metal, worth only a few silver coins, for precious furs. But this time, he was disappointed. And it was all caused by the sudden appearance of the man from the Zhao tribe. Baker's heart was bleeding, and the feeling of silver coins flying away was not pleasant at all. Since the tribe has no demand for iron products, I won't force it. I have some of everyone's favorite things to trade. Baker knew that he couldn't make any progress in exchanging iron products, so he decided to try the Indians' favorite rum. No matter what, this trip couldn't be in vain. He had to make some business. Meanwhile, Baker cursed the Mohicans in his heart. Damn you Native Americans. Noble Master Baker will teach you a lesson sooner or later. You may be numerous, but in my eyes, you're truly backward. I should unite the other Indian tribes and break up the Mohawks, weakening their power. Yeah, that's a great idea. So, which tribe should I invite to join? The Punks are a good idea, they're known to covet Mohawk lands. The Chequingan are also a good option, as they're sworn enemies of the Mohawks. Baker, with a friendly yet dangerous expression, was secretly plotting something sinister. We don't have much need for rum, either, it's truly a woman's drink. Black Bear, upon hearing Baker's words, pulled a wooden bottle from his bosom, waved it before Baker, opened the lid, and gulped down a few mouthfuls. He took a long breath, and the rich aroma of liquor instantly filled the tent. A group of Mohawk-haired drunks swallowed their saliva, gazing greedily at the wooden bottle in Black Bear's hands, their eyes etched with the urge to knock him down with a punch. Black Bear burped, feeling the jealous gazes of the drunks. Satisfied, he placed the bottle in front of Baker and gently raised his hand. His intention was clear, to let Baker have a taste. Damn Black Bear. He really has a good daughter. Little Emma always works behind Black Tongue, earning him some guotao every day to satisfy his cravings. Seeing Black Bear's boastful expression, the Mohawk elders began to mutter and complain among themselves. The elders' chatter was loud, and Baker could vaguely hear some of it. It seemed that the liquor in the wooden bottle was called guotao, a rather strange name. Nevertheless, he picked up the bottle and, imitating Black Bear's example, took a sip. Cough cough cough. Ho-ha-ho-ha. Seeing Baker choke on the liquor, Black Bear and the others burst into heartless laughter. What a wonderful wine. This tribe called Zhao must be wiped out. Of course, I must get a method of brewing this wine. Although Baker was ridiculed by the Mohicans, he was not angry. At the same time, he was shouting wildly in his heart. Because after tasting this wine, he immediately judged the value of this wine. Father, I'm back. Just as Baker lowered his head and thought, the leather curtain of the tent was lifted. A cute little girl walked in from outside, holding a golden object in her hand. Baker's face turned red in an instant, as if all the blood rushed to his head. Oh my God, what did I see? Mary, Jesus, Satan. Chapter 23, Black Eyes is still trustworthy. Could this guy be possessed by the devil? Little Emma was startled by Baker's excitement. She thought this white man was a bit delusional. Emma wasn't the only one who thought so. All the Mohawks in the tent were baffled by his reaction. It's just a piece of stone, why is he so excited about such a junky thing? White man is so strange it's almost incomprehensible. Everyone secretly laughed at Baker. Baker ignored the strange looks. His full attention was now focused on the gold nugget in Emma's hands. Satan, isn't there a large gold mine near the Mohawk tribe? Baker cried in his heart. If there really was such a large gold mine, as he suspected, he would be willing to abandon God for Satan. Excited, Baker stood up, took 2 steps at a time, and approached the little girl, offering what he considered a kind smile. Please, let me see the stone in your hand. Baker was so excited that his words were barely complete, revealing his current state of mind. Baker wasn't the only one affected. The 2 white guards who had followed him into the tent were also staring at Emma with wide eyes and greedy expressions. Only Sandori, the man who had brought Baker to the Mohican tribe, didn't react much. His mind was focused on the pickled mustard greens, wondering if he should secretly trade with the Mohicans. This pickled mustard greens tasted really good. After trying it once, he'd become addicted to it. Of course, the green, bear-like clothing the Mohicans were wearing wasn't bad either. Even the iron weapons on their waists could be exchanged. After all, these weapons were of much better quality than those of the white people. Sandori, despite being an Indian, had a good relationship with the white people. But that didn't mean he was an idiot. He could see things clearly. This is real gold. Emma tossed the gold-encrusted stone into Baker's hands, then jumped away and hid beside her father. Black Bear reached out and gently stroked Emma, soothing his frightened daughter. These damned white ghosts are so rude. They should all be taken away by the devil and have no place in this world. Seeing his daughter so frightened, her small body trembling slightly, Black Bear looked at Baker with a hint of ferocity. Baker was oblivious. He simply held the gold-encrusted stone, turning it over and swallowing his saliva. A greedy expression was visible on Baker's face. Baker, is this real gold? 2 guards approached, one on each side. They were hired by Baker. There were many people like them in the British immigrant camp. The 30 Years' War raged on in Europe, prompting many war-weary soldiers and bankrupts to migrate to America. Here, They sought a new life and hope. However, they knew nothing but fighting, so serving as guards for merchants became their means of supporting their families. Fortunately, the new world was fraught with danger, preventing them from being left without work. It's gold. I saw it right, it's gold, Baker nodded firmly, his voice firm. Boss, a nugget like this wouldn't appear out of nowhere. Perhaps there's a gold mine nearby, the guard on his left whispered quickly to Baker. Baker knew this all too well. Imagine there's a large gold mine nearby. If he could seize this area from those foolish Mohicans, find the gold mine, and mine it, he'd be a tycoon in no time. Once he had enough money, he could build his own fleet, form his own guard, and even become a noble. Sanderly. Cooling his fervent heart, Baker called out to his guide. Sanderly, who had been whispering with a Tito, stood up and approached Baker. Mr. Baker, what's going on? Sanderly was a bit impatient. He had just been discussing the possibility of intertribal trade with a Tito, exchanging furs for mustard and iron weapons. While they hadn't come to a conclusion, there was still hope. He had been planning to try harder, but now the damned whites had called him. How could he be happy? If it weren't for the fact that the whites could help him deal with the enemy tribe, Sanderly wouldn't have been so kind to them. Can you tell me where this stone was found? Are there many of these stones? If possible, I'd like to exchange iron and wine for this stone. Greedy Baker, taking advantage of the Mohicans' ignorance of gold, mistook it for stone. He believed this thing was completely useless to the Native Americans. Exchanging my ironwork for theirs was already a great boon to them. Sanderly glanced at Baker with a look of idiocy, then translated Baker's words into Indian language and addressed the Mohicans. As Sanderly finished his question, the Mohicans sitting nearby began to whisper among themselves. Their expressions varied, but most were mocking, and from time to time they glanced at Baker as if he were an idiot. These damned red-skinned natives, you actually look at me like that? You idiots, you have no idea what this is, or how much benefit it can bring you. You actually think I'm an idiot. In my opinion, you are the biggest idiots in the world. Baker, pretending not to notice the Mohicans' mocking expressions, could already sense the idiotic gazes. But for the sake of the gold, he had to keep his vicious curses to himself. And he had to maintain a faint smile on his face. This guy is such an idiot. What's so good about this shiny thing? Why is he so interested? It's hilarious, an old Mohawk whispered to his companion. Who knows? Maybe all the whiteskins are fools. But this is a good thing for us. Don't forget, these stones can't be eaten or used. If we can actually exchange them for ironware or something else, that would be great. While the iron weapons of the whiteskins are inferior, far inferior to those of the black pupils, it's still good to have something in exchange. Atito's father, the old leader of the Mohawk tribe, listened to the discussions of his fellow tribesmen and began to think. He admitted that everyone was right. These stones were truly of no use to them. If they could actually be exchanged for the things the whiteskins mentioned, it would be a great deal for the Mohawk people. His son, Atito, then gave him a sharp look, urging him to agree. Only Black Bear remained silent, quietly stroking his daughter's back. Little Emma whispered something in his ear, speaking to her father. Black Bear listened to his daughter's whisper, his expression expressionless. Father, Haitong seems to be interested in these stones. He said, if possible, he'd like to hire people from our Mohawk tribe to collect them. He's willing to trade them with pickled mustard, cotton clothes, and some iron tools. Little Emma was relaying to her father what Zhao Hongyu had said earlier. For the little girl, while these stones were useless, if possible, trading with her brother was more reassuring than with the whites. At the very least, Zhao Hongyu's fairness in dealings was well known. And the Mohawks were well aware of the whites' wickedness. Besides, Zhao Hongyu was considered a member of their extended Indian family, making him more approachable than the whites who had drifted from the sea to the land. One is one of us, the other an outsider. This is a question that everyone would choose. Father, the whites are evil-hearted. We must be careful not to be deceived when trading with them. Compared to these whites, Brother Haitong is more fair and convincing, so we should not trade with them. The little girl had been injured by a white man outside the British camp because of a wild rabbit. The white people's explanation was that it was an accidental injury. If Zhao Hongyu hadn't appeared, the injured girl might have died from complications caused by the inflammation of the wound. Therefore, the little girl was emotionally close to her savior. As for those wicked whites, it goes without saying how bad they are. After hearing his daughter's words, Black Bear raised his eyelids and glanced at the stone in Baker's hand. He then whispered to Emma, "You're right. Compared to these white people, Black Eyes is a trustworthy and fair person." He then gently patted Emma's head, signaling her to quiet down. Black Bear stood up, bent over, and crouched beside the old leader. As Black Bear whispered, the old leader nodded slightly. The surrounding Mohawk elders also stopped their conversation and looked at Black Bear and the old leader. Chapter 24 Gold. Black Bear conversed quietly with the old chief, Samra, for a moment before returning to his seat and quietly sitting down. The sudden silence within the previously noisy tent was a bit jarring. At least, it was a bit strange for Baker and the others. Tell this white man that our Mohawk tribe has no interest in trading with him, and we have no interest in his inferior ironware or his ice and fire wine. His goods are now of no use to us, so please leave our tribe. Samra, the old Mohawk chief, immediately made up his mind after hearing Black Bear's words. Since Black Eyes was also interested in the stone, Samra knew the right choice. Compared to the annoying and black-hearted white skin, the trustworthy and fair Black Eyes was undoubtedly the best choice. Besides, it was Black Eyes who saved Samra's life. While the Indians didn't know the idiom of repaying a favor, they knew who was truly kind to them. The guide, Sandori, relayed the old Mohican chief's reply to Baker, who was deeply disappointed. This was a matter of great importance to his future, and he wasn't about to give up. Respected chief, this stone is of no use to you, it's completely useless. Instead of just leaving it lying there, why not exchange it for something you need? Baker continued to work hard, fully aware of the enormous profits he could generate if he acquired these minerals. Of course, these stones are of no use to us, but even so, I don't want to trade with you white people. Samra's recovery made Baker choke. He couldn't understand why this old Native American wouldn't trade with him. Any other Native American tribe would have agreed to his offer long ago. For these uncivilized people, it was like pie in the sky. Damn you, old man. May Satan strike you with lightning and turn you trash. I don't understand what you natives are thinking. Instead of keeping this coveted gold, don't you know how to trade it for the supplies you need? Baker kept complaining to himself, as if Samra was foolish for not trading with him. Little did he know, Samra was actually doing the right thing. Despite his inward curses, Baker maintained a calm, kind smile. At that moment, he was like a colorful venomous snake, completely concealing his vicious side and revealing a dazzling display. Unfortunately, to Baker's utter disappointment and despair, no matter how much he raised his offer, the old leader of the Mohawk tribe simply shook his head and refused. Baker wanted to trade a fist-sized nugget of gold for 2 low-quality iron axes, a perfectly reasonable price, even a gift to the natives. Little did he know that after he offered this price, little Emma would tell her father, Black Bear, all the terms Zhao Hongai could offer. Compared to the stone Emma had offered, Zhao Hongai was willing to trade for a fingernail-sized piece of golden stone, and he was also willing to give them an axe, a set of wooden utensils, and pickled mustard greens. This made Zhao Hongai's offer even more attractive. Black Bear walked over to Baker, took Emma's stone, and then turned and walked back. Baker certainly didn't want to let the gold slip away. A piece that large must have weighed at least several ounces, but even if he didn't want to, he couldn't make the final decision. Understand that the stone still belonged to Emma, not to Baker. Baker, it seems they're unwilling to trade with us. Unless you're willing to offer them something more appealing. What do you think, Cax? A former British Royal Infantry great swordsman and now a mercenary in the British immigrant camps in the Americas, who was standing behind Baker, leaned over and whispered to Baker. Upon hearing this, Baker gritted his teeth and remained silent for a moment before responding. It seems we have no choice but to try another approach. These damned redskins are impossible to communicate with. If we weren't outnumbered, force would actually be a good solution. Baker deliberately lowered his head as he responded to Cox, not wanting the Native Americans to see the ferocious glare in his eyes. Indeed, after being repeatedly rejected by the old Mohican chief Samra, Baker had already harbored murderous intent. Faced with a gold vein, most likely a rich one, it was inevitable that white people, with their inherent fascination for gold, would have had perverse thoughts. Gold, it could turn good people into bad, kind people into demons. You could even call it a product of Satan. While the Native Americans considered gold to be just as useful as stone, beyond the American Indians, peoples from Europe, Africa, and Asia were all madly obsessed with it. And in this world, murder, slaughter, and war over gold never ceased. Of course, Those wars were always justified with plausible excuses. No one would ever actually say they were for gold. Mr. Baker, what are you going to do? Another guard whispered in. Baker's eyes darted around, quickly scanning the faces of the Mohicans. A hypothesis and a series of thoughts quickly emerged in his mind. Baker realized that the gold inlaid stone had been brought by the little girl, not the Mohicans present. During his conversations with them, the Mohicans had revealed that they seemed unaware of the gold veins. Therefore, it was certain that the gold vein he had suspected was likely discovered by the little girl. And in his quest to obtain the gold in the veins, he had made some minor mistakes. With these thoughts, Baker had a sinister thought: he had found a way to easily seize the gold mine. Shrugging his shoulders, Baker said to the Mohicans with a hint of helplessness, "What a shame. I had thought we could be good business partners, but since you're insisting on not making this deal, I think any further pressure would only ruin our friendship." As he spoke, Baker slowly returned to his seat and sat down. Seeing Baker no longer insistent, the Mohican leader, Samra, breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't want to strain relations with the whites. While the Mohicans weren't afraid of the whites, Samra was still deeply wary of their weapons. He was no longer young and had seen more carnage than the younger ones. He had witnessed countless deaths, and therefore understood the power of the whites better than many of the tribe's warriors. But that wasn't the most important thing. If it weren't just the whites, he wouldn't have to worry about them. What he worried about was that if relations with the whites became strained, some rival tribes might join forces with them to cause trouble for him. Uniting small and medium-sized tribes to counter larger ones has always been the specialty of the whites. Small and medium-sized tribes aren't formidable on their own, but when they unite, they become incredibly formidable. When Samra was young, the Mohegans weren't a major tribe in the area. The largest tribe in the area was the Apaches, which boasted thousands of warriors and a population of over 30,000. Yet, even this large tribe fell apart under the attacks and tactics of the whites. Samra was still young at the time, but he never forgot the incident. He still recalls the scene of the Apache leader being chopped off his limbs and having his heart ripped out by warriors from an opposing tribe. And all this was brought about by the whites who had arrived from the far reaches of the ocean. Sometimes Samra even wondered, why couldn't the Indians unite? If they did, it would be easy to defeat the whites. Unfortunately, Samra knew this ideal was unrealistic. The conflicts between the Indian tribes were numerous, making them impossible to reconcile. If you rashly ally with other tribes, or easily trust their promises, you'll pay the price in a matter of days. It's not uncommon for tribes to betray you or bring white people into the fight for a few benefits. White people enslave the men of the tribe, while allied Indian tribes seize the women of the destroyed tribes. Such wars of alliance for profit occur several times a year. Samra didn't want this to happen to his own tribe. Therefore, he tried to minimize his interactions with the whites. He believed that this would distract them from his tribe. Samra had no idea that without the gold, his actions could keep the tribe quiet for a few years. But with the appearance of the gold, the tranquility of the Mohegan tribe would undoubtedly be shattered. He didn't realize that gold could unleash the most complex emotions in the human heart: greed. Driven by this greed, humans commit countless ugly and unimaginable acts. Chapter 25: The Roller Guotao. Hey, brothers, are you here to trade? Outside the tent, Wang Shan casually approached several white guards and began to flirt. A stream of broken English emerged from Wang Shan's mouth. While not entirely authentic, it was still understandable. Of course, Wang Shan didn't possess the same incredible language skills as Zhao Hongyu. But his years of compulsory military service weren't in vain. While in the army, he'd taught himself English, which came in handy now. Seeing Wang Shan, wearing a green cotton coat, smiling as he approached them, the already nervous white guards grew even more nervous. They all knew these Indians were completely unruly. Who knew a single wrong word could spark a violent fight? Especially since they were currently inside the Mohawk camp. If a fight really came to a head, they would undoubtedly be the ones to suffer. That was undeniable. However, when Wang Shan's broken English tumbled out of his mouth, the white guards froze. Wow! It was truly unbelievable that such a Native American tribe could actually find someone who could speak English. This was truly a sign from God. While there were many incomprehensible aspects to this fellow's spoken language, it was generally understandable. It wasn't Wang Shan's fault, after all. When Wang Shan was trained in the space-time trader, he learned broken 21st century English. and the people he was communicating with were ancients from centuries past. While English was still the same, it was vastly different. The English of this era lacked a rich vocabulary and was peppered with slang. "Hey, I didn't expect you to speak our language. I wonder where you learned it. Although it's a little awkward, we can still communicate without any problems." The guards, who had been a little nervous, relaxed noticeably after hearing Wang Shan's broken English. While they still had a wary look on their faces, it was less so. It seemed that language truly brought people closer. "We learned it from the French to the north, but our tribe is currently at war with them." Wang Shan walked over and began to rant. "Damn those French. They should all be hanged." The British had no fondness for the French in Quebec. So, following Wang Shan's lead, the guard cursed. Watching Wang Shan engage in casual conversation, Zhao Hongayu's lips curled up slightly. He didn't need to ask what these white people were up to in the Mohican tribe, he could already figure it out. They were just merchants from the British settlement, trading their junk for more valuable Indian furs. The reason Zhao Hongayu didn't stop his men from trying to get close to them was simply because he wanted to see if he could get information about the settlement camps, population numbers, and distribution from them. This information was crucial to Zhao Hongayu. Spring had arrived, and the snow was beginning to melt. Time flies. Soon, we'll say goodbye to our cotton-padded jackets and enter the scorching heat of summer. At that time, it's no longer the season for white people to thrive, but rather the season for Indians. Indian summer wasn't just a slogan coined by white people. Zhao Hongayu also wanted to seize this opportunity to see if he could find some profit from the British immigrant camps to increase his income. Therefore, gathering intelligence on this matter was essential. "Chief, you're back." During the night's intelligence gathering, Song Hu and Zhang Tai, each with their own men, approached Zhao Hongayu. Hearing these words, Zhao Hongayu turned around and nodded. Now, including Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and Song Hu, Zhao Hongayu had 12 genetically engineered subordinates. Compared to his early days, he was no longer in the awkward position of being a lone commander. With his own people by his side, Zhao Hongayu felt a little more confident. While 12 subordinates wasn't a large number, it certainly provided Zhao Hongayu with a significant guarantee of personal safety. The loyalty of the Huaxia geneticists was undeniable. With their 100 loyalty points already, and their own Huaxia roots, the system granted them a 20-point bonus. Therefore, Zhao Hongayu had no need to worry about his subordinates defecting. If you were ever faced with a dangerous or unexpected situation, these geneticists, with their 120 loyalty points, would absolutely sacrifice themselves to protect him. "Are these the British from this region?" Zhao Hongayu lowered his voice and spoke in Chinese with Zhang Tai and the others, completely unconcerned about his words being overheard. On this continent, no one could understand his language. He wouldn't have dared to think that in Asia, but this was America, and it was the spring of 1621. Whether it was the French to the north, the British in Virginia, or the Spanish, Dutch, or Portuguese in the Caribbean, none of them would understand. Zhao Hongayu's conversation with Zhang Tai, Song Hu, and the others was deliberately low, but still quite loud. Their conversation caught the attention of the white guard who was chatting with Wang Shan. "Are those your companions? You don't look like you're from the Mohawk tribe. Your appearance is very different from theirs," the guard said to Wang Shan, retracting his gaze. Wang Shan smiled, pulled a wooden bottle from his pocket, gently removed the lid, and handed it over. "Of course, we come from the distant, snow-covered north. Try this." Wang Shan knew their identities. It was the distant Indian tribe Zhao Hongayu had concocted. Hiss. Taking the bottle from Wang Shan, the white guard sniffed it, and took a sip. It wasn't that he wasn't wary, but rather that he understood this was a form of Indian etiquette. Rejecting such a good offer could easily lead to unforeseen conflict. He had been in the Americas for many years and had experienced countless conflicts with Indians, many of which were caused by minor misunderstandings. "Is this wine? Why is it so spicy?" the guard asked as he handed the bottle back. "Of course, this is our tribe's secret baijiu, a drink only for men," Wang Shan replied with a chuckle. He lifted the bottle and, with the same hearty gulp, took 2 generous gulps. "Give me some more, if you'd like." Although he wasn't used to baijiu, the burning sensation in his throat was certainly pleasant. Furthermore, this novel baijiu seemed even more potent than rum or gin. As a long-time alcoholic, the guard certainly wouldn't pass up this unknown liquor. "No problem, we're friends now, aren't we?" Wang Shan handed the baijiu over again. As the two drank and chatted, The guard's tongue grew thicker, his wariness gradually fading. "Brother, you're right. This kind of liquor is truly for men." The guard, resting his hand on Wang Shan's shoulder, began to ramble, his tongue slurring and burping. Wang Shan, the instigator, couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. The white guard's situation caught the attention of the others. Worried about their companions, the other guards slowly gathered around. After Wang Shan's brief words and the praise of the drunken guard, the gathered white guards all tried the secret liquor of the snow-covered tribe from the far north. It didn't matter, they were captivated by the taste of Erguotao. Although this inferior knockoff was simply alcohol diluted with water, these unsophisticated people didn't know that. At first, they simply thought this drink was a bit strong, not as good as rum, whiskey, or gin. Little did they know, the more they drank, the better it tasted, and slowly. To keep them entertained, Zhao Hongyu even invited Zhang Tai and Song Hu to join him, and even brought on the other 9 lives genetics people. As the saying goes, deep feelings are best swallowed, shallow feelings are best licked. These 17th century European bumpkins were no match for the geneticists with 21st century drinking experience. So, after a while, the guards were flushed and unable to speak clearly. And because they were drunk, they opened their mouths to all the questions, allowing Wang Shan and the others to gain valuable information. Zhao Hongyu chuckled to himself as he glanced around. It was then that he realized that Emma, the girl who had been following him around, seemed to be gone. Fortunately, they were already back at the Mohawk camp, so he wasn't worried about Emma. Just as Zhao Hongyu was about to lift the leather curtain of the tent and step inside, it suddenly swung open, and a white man emerged. Zhao Hongyu slightly sidestepped, clearing the blocked path. The person who emerged was none other than the British merchant Baker. He sensed someone blocking his path and glanced up. He noticed the man blocking his path looked somewhat different from the average Native American, a somewhat gentler appearance. Baker, however, paid no attention to Zhao Hongyu. His heart was filled with golden glory. Guide Sandori and 2 tall guards followed closely behind, exiting the Mohican meeting tent. Next to them appeared a group of Mohican elders, their leader Samara, Black Bear, and Atito. "Brother, I find you all quite strange. Why are you all so interested in this?" Just as Zhao Hongyu cast his gaze towards Baker's back, he felt someone pulling him, followed by a familiar, clear voice. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.